Marvel. I created a sanctuary in Marvel Universe. Chapter 81. Just half an hour after the incident subsided, an urgent notice from the sanctuary had already reached the desks of various heads of state, announcing the complete end of the sudden demon invasion. Along with the notice came an even more eye-catching piece of news. Pope Yifeng would personally go to the United Nations headquarters 3 days later to preside over a global high-level summit. This caused a stir. The demon invasion was impossible to conceal. Countless people witnessed Blackheart's monstrous demon true form, which blotted out the sun, through live webcasts, and saw the powerlessness of modern weapons in the face of supernatural strength. Hell and demon, words that once existed only in mythological texts, instantly dominated global search terms, becoming the hottest topic of conversation on every street corner. At this sensitive moment, the papacy and the sanctuary proactively convened a global conference, the profound implications of which kept countless political observers and analysts awake all night. This is coming with great momentum, forcing us to take a stand. United States, White House Strategy Meeting Room. The air was thick with the heavy scent of coffee and a sense of oppression. The president slammed the document bearing the sanctuary's emblem onto the table, his face showing unconcealed fatigue. During this period, global crises seemed to have conspired to occur one after another on this land. The unrest caused by Valak had not yet fully subsided when Magneto made a powerful appearance, shaking the Statue of Liberty. And these two crises were ultimately resolved by the Pope, who was far away in the sanctuary. What most alarmed those in power was the just concluded demon invasion. Although direct casualties were kept to a minimum, the psychological impact and disruption of order it caused far surpassed previous events. The cameras faithfully recorded the scene of intercontinental missiles being ineffective against the demon Blackheart, and the terrifying power of him causing mountains to collapse and the earth to crack with every gesture was instantly transmitted globally via the internet. If Yifeng had not ultimately intervened, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Now, global public opinion was completely boiling, with, should a special agency be established to deal with supernatural events, becoming the core issue. All signs pointed to one conclusion: fighting the supernatural with the supernatural was currently the most effective, and perhaps the only viable, path. But this precisely touched the most sensitive nerve of the existing power structure. They absolutely could not sit idly by as the status of mutants and other superhumans infinitely increased. Once the social structure was overturned as a result, and individual power could surpass or even replace the strategic position of nuclear weapons, then the balance of power and wealth would inevitably tip towards these superhuman individuals. A more profound and fatal fear lay in time. The lifespan of superhuman powerhouses was a huge unknown. For those with regenerative abilities like Wolverine Logan, or ancient bloodlines like vampires, living for 100 or 200 or even 1,000 years was not difficult. How long was that for the United States, with a history of only over 200 years? If this were true, ordinary people would never have a chance to rise in this new era. At the same time, in the sanctuary, inside the papal hall, the afterglow of the setting sun streamed through the huge stained glass windows, casting colorful and solemn light patterns on the clean, mirror-like, pale white marble floor. Yifeng stood silently by the window, the hem of his white gold papal robe gently swaying with the breeze, his gaze seemingly piercing through the sea of clouds, looking towards the unknown distance. Yifeng, you've moved a bit too fast. The old pope's voice came from behind him. He leaned on his jewel-encrusted staff, a symbol of his past authority, his brows furrowed with an lingering worry. Yifeng turned around, his eyes clear and firm. Time waits for no one, and invaders will not give us the luxury of leisurely preparation. The world has reached a tipping point, and change is inevitable. This conference, even if it cannot once and for all resolve the generational conflict between mutants and humans, must push forward the process of building a global superhuman social system. I understand your thoughts, child. The old pope sighed. But your forceful push will inevitably provoke a strong backlash from those old guys. The power and wealth they control form the apex of the current world's pyramid. Once the gloves are completely off, I'm afraid. The old pope had already abdicated and should no longer meddle in specific affairs. But since Yifeng's succession, the papacy's prestige had soared, reaching an unprecedented peak in hundreds of years. Deep down, he yearned to witness the papacy truly direction glory under his gaze. In his opinion, Yifeng was young and promising, but his methods could perhaps be more circuitous, allowing him to achieve his goals gradually. Yifeng's face showed a hint of a helpless smile. For this elder who fully supported him, he always maintained the greatest respect. Let us young people deal with these storms. You should worry less and enjoy your golden years in peace. The reason I am eager to push this is because I have a premonition of a greater crisis approaching. The great era of the supernatural is dawning, and I have touched upon deeper, hidden parts of this world. His gaze once again turned to the window, his voice becoming low and solemn. On the scale of the universe, there exist supreme powerhouses capable of easily tearing apart stars and controlling laws. In front of them, our proud modern technology is simply too weak. The old pope gazed at the unquestionable determination in Yifeng's eyes, and finally nodded slowly. I hope you are right. Shortly after sending off the old pope, the head of the sanctuary's direct advanced laboratory hurried into the papal office, carrying an encrypted electronic file tablet. Your Holiness, this is the latest research and analysis report you requested. Regarding your hypothesis, we still lack decisive evidence. Existing data can only partially support your inference, but cannot form a complete logical loop. The head's face showed obvious fatigue, and his eyes were mixed with helplessness and complex emotions. Yifeng took the file tablet, his fingertips quickly sliding across the cold screen. His proposed hypothesis of the common underlying X gene in all humanity was considered almost fantastical within the laboratory, but these few months of intensive research had indeed yielded some breakthrough data. Although insignificant, it was like tearing a tiny crack of light in the darkness. You've worked hard. The research must continue, but the core principle remains unchanged. It must be completely voluntary. Project subsidies and bonuses can be appropriately increased to ensure team stability. Whether human or mutant, everyone must be treated equally. Yifeng quickly scanned the key data points, his tone calm. The head bowed and quietly exited the office. The spacious room returned to silence, with only the faint sound of files being turned. The progress is still too slow. Yifeng put down the file tablet, rubbed his throbbing temples, and muttered softly. He had originally intended to use the sanctuary's resources and his foresight to forcefully accelerate this process. But reality was cruel. In just a few months, it was ultimately difficult to catch up with the research results that a genius like Bolivar Trask had poured decades of effort into. That's right, Yifeng's goal was to confirm a groundbreaking theory. That within all humans on this earth, the X gene lay dormant. Whether this gene originated from the ancient celestials' experiments on primitive humans, or from the life essence of a fallen god flowing into the human gene pool. As long as this could be proven, it would fundamentally prove that mutants were not aliens or monsters. They shared the same origin as all ordinary humans, and were compatriots with infinite possibilities, latent within the human race. However, reality was stark. In most ordinary humans, the X gene was in an undetectable silent state. With current technological levels, it was impossible to effectively detect it, let alone predict when these dormant genes would go haywire, or when a person would awaken as a mutant. Charles, when you first created the concept of a mutant, although it was well-intentioned, it inadvertently drew a dividing line. Yifeng sighed helplessly. Charles's original intention was to provide a haven of identity for his kind, but this designation, to some extent, separated mutants from ordinary humans, turning them into two opposing groups. This was precisely the core root of the conflict. Ordinary people did not consider mutants to be their kind, viewing them as a threat, while some mutants saw themselves as a superior evolutionary form, originating from humans but rightfully transcending humans, and even lording over them. This opposition was so similar to the complex relationship between humans and vampires, which was both homologous and antagonistic. Over time, it would become very difficult to mend this opposition. What Yifeng wanted to do was to break down this wall of prejudice through the most hardcore genetic science research. But clearly, the road ahead was still long. His thoughts drifted to that tragic timeline known as Days of Future Past. In the future, sentinel robots precisely identified and hunted down mutants, and even ordinary humans carrying the gene, by detecting the dormant X gene within them. When the power of identification and life and death was completely in the hands of a few human elites, mutants and even ordinary people carrying the gene across the entire world faced doomsday, ultimately forcing the surviving mutants to risk restarting the timeline to seek a glimmer of hope. If the laboratory he was currently investing in could take a step ahead and prove to the entire world that everyone contained this gift from God, then the so-called mutant threat theory would collapse on its own. Since everyone had the potential to awaken, there would naturally no longer be the extreme mentality of not worrying about scarcity but about inequality. But judging from the current progress, it was almost impossible to achieve this grand goal within the next 5 years. Just as his thoughts were racing and he was about to close the file, his gaze inadvertently fell upon a secondary finding in the report's appendix. This special genetic marker actually exists. Yi Feng's eyebrows raised slightly, his body unconsciously sitting up straighter, his fingertips resting on that bolded conclusion. Although this was different from the universality of the X gene he was primarily seeking, it was an unexpected and important discovery. This report itself could serve as one of the powerful pieces of evidence at the United Nations conference 3 days later, to push the global community to seriously address supernatural phenomena and build a new system. Combined with the recently occurred and globally watched demon invasion event, it could temporarily suppress the rampant wave of mutant threat theories to the lowest level. This was good news. Over 3 days, high-level officials from various countries around the world unanimously adjusted their schedules, either dealing with urgent matters in advance or temporarily postponing them. Afterward, they all set off for the United Nations headquarters. At this time, the area around the United Nations was under complete martial law, and the security level had been raised to a historical high. It was an extremely rare sight for heads of state and core decision-makers from all over the world to gather at the United Nations so uniformly. Past United Nations conferences were mostly attended by diplomatic delegations from various countries, but this time was completely different. The demon invasion incident had too far-reaching an impact, and coupled with the invitation from the renowned new Pope, Yi Feng, no one dared to take it lightly. For both public and private reasons, they all wanted to see this legendary figure with their own eyes. 3 days passed in a flash, and the United Nations headquarters witnessed an unprecedented grand occasion. Almost every hour, a special plane carrying a head of state landed at the airport, and motorcades drove into the headquarters area under strict escort, the atmosphere solemn and tense. Has His Holiness the Pope arrived? The chief person in charge of reception asked his subordinate anxiously, fine beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He has. He arrived at the conference center half an hour ago and is currently in the exclusive lounge. The subordinate reported quickly. At this time, there was still more than an hour before the scheduled start of the meeting. Yi Feng traveled light, with only a few necessary cardinals, Clarice, and Logan accompanying him. Johnny and Anna remained in sanctuary to prevent emergencies. Clarice was brought along so that in the event of an emergency, a teleportation gate could be opened immediately. His Holiness the Pope, the meeting time is almost here. Outside the lounge, a respectful reminder from a staff member was heard. Let's go. The United Nations Assembly Hall, capable of accommodating thousands of people, was now packed. High-level representatives from various countries around the world had already taken their seats, and everyone's gaze was fixed on the entrance, quietly awaiting the central figure of this meeting. Creak. The heavy doors of the assembly hall were slowly pushed open. In an instant, everyone's eyes collectively turned to the doorway. When Yi Feng's figure appeared in their sight, a thought involuntarily arose in many people's minds: the rumors were true. This young pope was handsome and had an extraordinary temperament. He looked very young, but his deep eyes and steady steps exuded a composure and majesty that did not match his age, like an unshakable mountain, inexplicably making people feel at ease. It seems everyone is very concerned about hell and the demon invasion incident. Then we won't beat around the bush. This meeting is presided over by me, and the main topics are gods, hell, and humanity, and whether it is necessary for us to promote the construction of a global supernatural armed force. Yi Feng walked directly to the podium in the center of the hall, and his voice was clearly transmitted through the microphone to every corner. The huge circular screen behind him lit up, displaying the presentation meticulously prepared by the Holy See in advance. I presume everyone knows that not long ago, a demon invasion incident occurred in Texas, United States. As Yi Feng spoke, he controlled the screen to play the on-site video footage collected by the Holy See. Those present were already familiar with these images, their respective intelligence departments had even repeatedly analyzed them. In the video, humanity's most advanced thermal weapons appeared powerless before the demons, and those shocking scenes still left them with lingering fear. The leading demon is named Blackheart. His three subordinate demons are elemental demons who control the three basic elements of water, earth, and wind. In terms of individual strength, they can only be considered high-level demons in hell, not even comparable to the demon god Valak from the previous invasion. However, Blackheart's identity is extremely special. Yi Feng zoomed in on Blackheart's image. The twisted face on the screen was precisely the most powerful demon that day. He is the son of one of the current Hell Lords, Mephisto. His purpose in coming to Earth this time was to seize the thousands of fallen holy souls sealed within the San Venganza contract to enhance his own power, and he also attempted to use the Hell dimension origin he stole to forcibly open up a new Hell territory, thereby ascending to a true demon god. At this point, Yi Feng noticed that a representative below had raised his hand. He nodded slightly, signaling for the person to speak. His Holiness the Pope, according to your statement, Hell, can it be opened up? Does this mean that Hell is not the only existence as we traditionally understand it? The representative raised his question. That's an excellent question. Yi Feng nodded approvingly. Here, I can provide a preliminary popular science explanation for everyone. The Hell dimension itself is an extremely special existence, its area is almost infinite, and its dimensional energy is immeasurably vast. Because of this, a situation of warlordism has formed within the Hell dimension. However, these powerful entities are not all in the same dimensional space. He paused, looked around the hall, and continued to explain. These hells, everyone should be familiar with them. For example, Hela, the goddess of death of the 9 realms in Norse mythology, her realm of Helheim, also known as the underworld, Hades, land of the dead in Greek mythology. In the Japanese Takamagahara mythology system, Tianjin Wangxing, who lives in the land of Yomi, and in Egyptian mythology, the realm of the dead ruled by Osiris, these are essentially different branch domains derived from the main Hell dimension. As soon as Yi Feng finished speaking, the entire assembly hall instantly erupted in an uproar. This news was too shocking. If these legendary hells were real, did that mean the corresponding gods were also real? Only at this moment did many truly understand the astonishing amount of information contained in the topic Yi Feng had proposed at the beginning. His Holiness the Pope. Are you saying that gods are also real? Another representative couldn't help but stand up directly, his voice carrying a subtle tremor. That's right. Gods do indeed exist. However, for various reasons, perhaps the strengthening of dimensional barriers, or changes in belief, the main forces of almost all major pantheons have now left Earth or are active in other dimensions. Even if a few gods still remain on Earth, most have fallen into a long slumber. Yi Feng's answer was firm and without the slightest hesitation. Excuse me, do you have any concrete evidence for these statements? Another representative asked, his tone carrying the caution and skepticism of the scientific age. Most of the people sitting there were elites who had received modern higher education, upheld a rational spirit, and were even staunch atheists and materialists. What Yi Feng was saying at this moment was violently impacting the worldview they had built over decades. Evidence. I have a report here that might be called indirect evidence. Yi Feng seemed to have anticipated this, he skillfully turned the PPT to the next page. What was displayed on the screen was precisely the gene analysis report submitted by the Sanctuary Conglomerate Laboratory a few days ago. Immediately send it back to our country and have the top biological geneticist team conduct a simultaneous analysis. Below the stage, high-level officials from various countries quietly issued instructions to their accompanying technical officers. This report was too specialized, they needed the support of a think tank to fully understand it. Everyone can focus on these descriptions in the report. Yi Feng circled several key paragraphs with a laser pointer. Genetic sample source, unknown. Collection location, Egypt, an ancient country exceptionally rich in mythical legends. And the report's conclusion shows, the existence time of this genetic sample is extremely ancient, far exceeding human civilization history, but its cells still retain weak activity. Based on basic model inference, the cellular vitality and potential lifespan of the sample's owner far exceed the biological limits of current humanity. More importantly, its genetic structure is completely inconsistent with all known life on Earth. His voice suddenly rose, clear and powerful, spreading throughout the entire venue. In other words, the source of this genetic sample does not belong to any known life on Earth. We have ample reason to believe that this is a drop of divine blood. It originated from a true God. Whoosh! The entire United Nations Assembly Hall was like a bombshell had been dropped, instantly erupting. Gods. Demons. In the past, they would have scoffed at this, dismissing it as nonsense. But now, the demon invasion had just happened a few days ago, leaving them no choice but to believe. Everyone. Please be quiet. Yi Feng's voice contained a peculiar calming power, gradually quieting the noisy venue. The video played earlier, I'm sure you've all seen it many times, and perhaps even had it technically appraised. Regarding this, I want to emphasize one point. Facing these gods and demons from different dimensions, possessing extraordinary powers, humanity needs to unite. The role of modern thermal weapons is extremely limited in front of them. Should we seriously consider using supernatural power to counter the supernatural, and establish a global, rapidly deployable supernatural armed force? After all, not every crisis can be timely supported by mere sanctuary. If it's just a single incident, it's manageable, but what if it's multiple outbreaks, or even a global invasion? He threw out an even more unsettling piece of information. Moreover, as far as I know, there is more than one location on Earth where demons or other dangerous interdimensional creatures are sealed. I imagine, none of you would want to completely entrust all supernatural incidents concerning the survival of your nations to sanctuaries handling, would you? At this point, Yi Feng changed his tone, adopting a strategy of feigned retreat to advance. Of course, as assistance, the Holy See and Sanctuary are willing to provide some specialized equipment, holy water, and other supplies targeting demons and dark creatures. But the supernatural armed forces of each country, in the end, must still be in your own hands. These words cleverly alleviated the wariness of various national leaders regarding their power being undermined and the Holy See's influence expanding excessively. However, ordinary people would not realize that once the curtain of the supernatural era is drawn, the existing social structure will inevitably undergo subtle changes. Additionally, it needs to be clarified that the supernatural armed forces mentioned here are not limited to mutants. It can include cultivators who have achieved success, mages who study mysteries, or even special warriors strengthened through methods similar to the super soldier serum. As for which path to adopt, each country can discuss and decide on its own, based on its cultural and resource endowments. Yi Feng broadened the concept at the opportune moment. Looking at the representatives from various countries below, who were deep in thought, a subtle smile quietly appeared at the corner of Yi Feng's mouth. Yi Feng sat calmly at the head of the table, offering no further comments as he watched the world leaders whispering below. Inside the United Nations General Assembly Hall, brilliant crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow on the dark mahogany conference table, illuminating the varied expressions on the faces of the attendees. The air was thick with a mixture of tension and anticipation, as if every subtle sound was bearing witness to a historic moment. Although this meeting lasted only about 3 hours, it had already caused a huge stir worldwide. Even after Yi Feng announced the recess, the discussions among the world leaders continued, rising and falling, without ceasing for a long time. Yi Feng tilted his head slightly, listening intently to these discussions, keenly catching every key piece of information. His gaze slowly swept across the room, noting that many world leaders, especially representatives from smaller nations with weaker national power, showed obvious signs of worry. As they whispered to each other, their eyes occasionally darted towards Yi Feng, and their words were filled with concerns about the possibility of superhumans seizing power. In contrast, representatives from some major powers appeared more composed, their discussions clearly focused on establishing national superhuman response agencies under their own control. As Yi Feng had anticipated, no sovereign nation would be willing to hand over all superhuman incidents to the Sanctum Sanctorum. The recent demon invasion occurred in a remote area of Texas, and the Sanctum Sanctorum's intervention was still acceptable, but what if the next superhuman incident erupted in the White House or the Kremlin? Would confidential information vital to the nation's lifeline be exposed to the Sanctum Sanctorum's view? This was a risk that no leader of any nation could tolerate. His Holiness the Pope. We have some important matters we wish to discuss with you. After the meeting, would you be able to spare some time to speak with us? A leader from a small nation stood up and respectfully bowed to Yi Feng. Yes, Yi Feng responded calmly, nodding, his slender fingers gently tapping the table. He had already guessed their intentions, but this was an excellent opportunity for the Papal State and the Sanctum Sanctorum to enhance their international status and influence. His gaze once again swept across the room, keenly noticing that some nations had already begun to form small groups, clearly preparing for the coming superhuman era. Yi Feng did not intend to interfere too much with this. He had already put forward his suggestions, how to implement them was up to the individual consideration of the world leaders. Seeing that the time had come, Yi Feng gently tapped the gavel in front of him, and a crisp sound echoed through the hall. This meeting is adjourned, he announced, his voice steady and powerful. As the representatives gradually left, Yi Feng motioned for the United Nations staff to arrange a small conference room for him. While waiting, he stood by the window, gazing at the United Nations skyline, his thoughts already drifting to more distant places. Soon after, in an elegantly appointed side conference room, Yi Feng faced 12 leaders of small nations. Is everyone here? Yi Feng entered the conference room, his gaze quickly scanning each leader present. Everyone is here, His Holiness the Pope, the leader chosen as their representative replied respectfully. These nations were in a similar predicament to the former Vatican. Although they had seats in the United Nations, they had almost no say, at most only the right to attend meetings. Yi Feng elegantly made a gesture to invite them to sit. Please sit, everyone. Feel free to share your thoughts. The situation is this, His Holiness the Pope. Our nations have limited national power. We lack the resources to independently research human evolution courses, and we are also concerned that rashly forming superhuman agencies could trigger internal unrest. As you know, the turmoil once caused by the mutants, therefore, we have decided not to form our own superhuman response agencies. The representative took a deep breath, organizing his words. He paused, exchanged a glance with the other leaders, and continued, we hope to hire the Papal State to provide superhuman protection and assist in handling potential superhuman incidents within our countries. In return, we are willing to provide corresponding resources, which could be funding or other forms of compensation. The other leaders nodded in agreement. This was the best solution they had arrived at after careful consideration. In a context where major powers sought self-reliance and medium-sized nations united for self-preservation, these small nations could only rely on the Sanctum Sanctorum as their backing. Pope Yi Feng, as the most powerful individual on Earth, had successively dealt with the 72-pillar demon Valak, Magneto, and the recent demon invasion, demonstrating an unparalleled strength. Furthermore, the Sanctum Sanctorum was a religiously neutral state with no interest in the internal affairs of other nations, making it undoubtedly the best choice. Oh, I will discuss this matter in detail with the College of Cardinals when I return to the Sanctum Sanctorum. As you know, the Papal State has only recently reactivated its armed forces, and its manpower is quite limited. Yi Feng raised an eyebrow slightly, showing a thoughtful expression. He deliberately left room for negotiation, things that were too easily obtained would instead cause people to be suspicious. This was an important lesson he had learned after several reincarnations. Of course, we await your news. The leaders expressed understanding of Yi Feng's response. This aligned with their consistent impression of the Papal State's cautious approach. But please rest assured, the Sanctum Sanctorum will never ignore nations that require protection. If a long-term employment relationship is established, the Sanctum Sanctorum will certainly propose terms satisfactory to both parties. Yi Feng's tone shifted, becoming gentle yet firm. Then we shall take our leave now, so as not to delay your time. The leaders stood up and bid farewell one after another. They also needed to return to their countries to further discuss this major decision with their high-ranking officials, as it involved entrusting some national defense authority to an external organization. After all the leaders had departed, Logan, who had been standing silently by the door, stepped forward, his deep voice carrying an undisguised excitement. I never thought we would be able to openly step onto the world stage so quickly. Clarice, standing beside him, also had an unusual gleam in her eyes. She gently clasped her hands, feeling the energy surging within her. As a mutant who had once been forced to hide her abilities, she understood the significance of this opportunity more than anyone. The words you once spoke are gradually becoming reality, Logan said, his voice full of emotion. He still remembered that night, their conversation in the small grove, which Yifeng was now fulfilling one by one. Let's go, it's time to return to the papal state. There's still a lot to deal with. Yifeng smiled faintly, adjusting his robe. Indeed, there was still a long way to go before the superhuman society he envisioned could be realized. But being able to integrate superhuman powers into the human social system was already a huge step forward. Although high-ranking officials in various countries still harbored reservations about superhumans, they could not deny the significance of this change. Of course, the establishment of superhuman agencies would inevitably be accompanied by the rise of civilian forces. There were quite a few hidden superhuman organizations in this world, and it was foreseeable that the future social order would face challenges. But this was the necessary pain of transformation, and all Yifeng could do was try to minimize the impact. Back in the apostolic palace of the Sanctum Sanctorum, Yifeng stood before a large world map, holding a red marker pen, and circled the locations of the 12 small nations seeking cooperation one by one. The lingering glow of the setting sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting mottled light and shadow on the map. From the perspective of national development, these geographical locations are indeed not superior. No wonder their economies and national power have struggled to improve. He murmured softly, his pen tip lightly tracing the map, but the next second, his eyes sharpened, and a faint smile played on his lips. But for my plan, this is an excellent opportunity. In his battle with Blackheart, Yifeng profoundly realized the fragility of Earth. The destruction caused by battles between top-tier powerhouses was devastating to this Earth. One careless move and this Earth could be shattered. He had been thinking about how to strengthen Earth's defenses, and the best solution he eventually came up with was to imitate the realm of the gods from his previous life by establishing a barrier. The distribution of these 12 small nations perfectly met his vision of establishing the Zodiac 12 palaces. By activating divine patterns through the connection of cosmos power, a super-array covering the entire Earth could be constructed. This would not only ensure Earth's safety to the greatest extent but also continuously strengthen as Yifeng's power increased. Although his current strength made it difficult to fully realize this concept, he could use the power of the Sanctum Sanctorum to lay the groundwork first. Even if he couldn't completely restrict top-tier powerhouses for now, it could at least significantly reduce the damage caused by superhuman battles to Earth. After the United Nations meeting, the attitudes of various countries towards superhuman powers clearly softened. Mutants, who had previously hidden due to the mutant threat theory, also keenly noticed this change. However, most people's attention was still focused on the papal state. In Xavier's mansion on the outskirts of New York, Professor Charles watched the news reports about the United Nations meeting on television and couldn't help but sigh. What His Holiness the Pope has achieved is something Eric and I have never been able to accomplish. He turned his wheelchair, looking out at the setting sun, clearly aware that the establishment of superhuman armed agencies meant that mutants with stable abilities would become targets for various forces to recruit. Even if they couldn't wield core power, at least their living environment would fundamentally improve, which was a goal he and Magneto had strived for many years but failed to achieve. With the establishment of superhuman armed agencies in various countries, many individuals with abilities gradually emerged. But some were still observing, not in a hurry to reveal themselves. Pope Yifeng, that demon, was he Mephisto's son? In a university, a young man looked at the United Nations report, his eyes flickering. The long-cherished wish that had not been realized after many years of struggle seemed to find hope in the other person. I still need to wait and see. However, he was not in a hurry to draw conclusions. As someone who had been in contact with hell, he knew its power well. In his opinion, even Mephisto's child was dealt with such difficulty. He was not yet qualified to be relied upon. Doom, what are you doing? Aren't you going to the lab yet? The voice snapped Doom out of his thoughts. I'll be there in a moment. Reed, you go to the lab and wait for me first. Doom recovered and immediately said. After the world-shaking meeting at the United Nations headquarters concluded, the global political landscape was quietly undergoing profound changes. Currently, in a heavily guarded conference room in Washington, D.C., the U.S. high-level officials were holding an emergency meeting concerning the nation's future. In the Oval Conference Room, thick curtains were half-drawn, filtering the afternoon sun into soft beams. The president clasped his hands on the gleaming mahogany conference table, his gaze slowly sweeping over the high-ranking officials present. Everyone, tell me your thoughts. The establishment of an extraordinary response agency is imperative. His voice was low and serious. Although the United Nations General Assembly hosted by Yi Feng only lasted a few hours, its impact was still reverberating globally. The U.S. high-level officials were particularly anxious. Almost all three world-shaking extraordinary wars to date had occurred on U.S. soil. This fact weighed like a boulder on the hearts of every participant, making the atmosphere in the entire conference room exceptionally somber. Perhaps we could consider contacting Professor Charles. The Mutant Academy has always maintained a relatively peaceful attitude towards human society, and their students' abilities are relatively stable, their personalities not so extreme. A cabinet member in a dark gray suit was the first to break the silence. This suggestion sparked a low murmur of discussion among the attendees. It was well known that the government's super soldier experiments had been suspended for a long time, and restarting this plan would not only require a huge investment but also face numerous technical challenges. In contrast, the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters was indeed a ready-made option. The students of Xavier Academy are certainly worth considering. But we must establish corresponding restraint mechanisms, especially for Professor Charles himself. Another security advisor cautiously stated. These words voiced the concerns in many people's hearts. After all, with Charles's telepathic abilities, if he intended to seize power, it would be as easy as turning over his hand. In the past, mutants had a low status, and even if Charles changed people's minds, it would be difficult to succeed, as he would eventually pass away. But now, in the larger context of Yi Feng promoting the public disclosure of extraordinary powers globally, the status of mutants was gradually rising. More and more mutants were beginning to reveal their identities, and Charles could openly step into the center of power. He only needed to successfully handle a few extraordinary incidents, shaping himself and the X-Men into heroic figures, to accumulate immense popular prestige. When the time was ripe, even running for U.S. president might not be impossible. Therefore, in the eyes of the U.S. high-level officials, Charles was undoubtedly a double-edged sword, the key being how to wield him. Regarding restraint measures, we are actually already conducting relevant research. A military general suddenly spoke, attracting everyone's attention. Under the expectant gazes of the crowd, he continued, we accidentally discovered a method that can inhibit the mutant gene. Although it is currently still in the research phase, preliminary experiments have achieved some results. However, he paused slightly. This inhibitor's effect is not permanent. It can only temporarily deprive mutants of their abilities, and its stability needs to be improved. Several mutant test subjects have already died due to genetic collapse. But if this inhibitor can be perfected, his voice gradually became firm. Then mutants will become a controllable weapon in our hands. We only need to make them wear devices containing the inhibitor, and the problem will be solved. Even that Pope of the Sanctuary may also become our weapon in the future. His gaze deepened. These words made everyone present's eyes light up. Indeed, Yi Feng's combat power had been increasing day by day since his appearance, easily suppressing Magneto in the Battle of New York and successively subduing two demons. If such power could be controlled, the benefits it would bring would be immeasurable. Then let's prepare on two fronts. Continue to develop the inhibitory agent, and at the same time, announce the establishment of an extraordinary agency responsible for handling domestic extraordinary incidents. The president finally made the decision. A month later, countries around the world successively announced the establishment of their own extraordinary agencies, aimed at responding to domestic extraordinary incidents, while also requesting assistance from the sanctuary. At this time, the sanctuary had already signed employment agreements with 12 small countries and began to construct the legendary Zodiac 12 palaces. These were the residences of the 12 constellation Gold Saint Seiya, highly representative in the Saint Seiya system. Once the Zodiac 12 palaces were completed, the sanctuary would dispatch Gold Saint Seiya to reside there. In addition, the sanctuary also provided these countries with a batch of supplies blessed by the Pope. These supplies could not only quickly heal injuries but also had a strong restraining effect on demons and dark creatures, making other countries envious. Yi Feng was not stingy about this. These supplies could be manufactured based on his element control ability and were not difficult to produce. With his current strength, if he produced at full capacity, one day's output would be enough to meet the annual needs of all countries worldwide. Moreover, these transactions would bring enormous wealth to the sanctuary, and the sanctuary, which was vigorously developing its extraordinary endeavors, indeed needed vast financial support. At the same time, Yi Feng also established a new laboratory, specifically for researching metal materials. As his strength gradually increased, the forging of Saint Cloth was already on the agenda. The Saint Cloth could greatly enhance the combat power of Cosmos users and was an indispensable equipment for Saint Seiya. The laboratory also received instructions to acquire vibranium, but Yi Feng maintained a casual attitude about it, as there was neither Wakanda nor Atlantis in this world. The output of vibranium mostly relied on luck, and so far, the sanctuary's exploration team had not discovered any vibranium veins. According to the laboratory's estimates, the total known vibranium in the world currently might only be enough to forge 12 gold Saint Seiya Saint Cloth. The news of the extraordinary veil being lifted also caused a huge stir in the underground world. Vampires, dark creatures, mutants, and other supernatural beings surfaced, and some lucky individuals who accidentally gained superpowers also appeared. What exactly does this Pope want to do? In the witches' forest, the witches gathered there discussed worriedly. The long-standing peace was broken, and even their hidden existence was exposed to public view, making their situation precarious. Mutants. A witch complained angrily. Especially those lucky individuals who suddenly gained superpowers, which led to human explorers frequently intruding even into their secluded territory, attempting to acquire magic inheritance or seek artifacts. The world seemed to have set off a wave of pursuit for extraordinary power. Meanwhile, in the distant Kamar Taj, sorcerer Ancient One's hand holding a teacup paused slightly. She sensed a large crowd gathering outside Kamar Taj. They had heard from somewhere that Kamar Taj was a holy place for archmages. The most powerful archmages on earth were hidden here. Sorcerer Supreme. An archmage hesitated to speak. Although he understood Yi Feng's original intention to promote extraordinary concepts, he couldn't help but worry. The popularization of extraordinary power often came with huge risks. Why did the Sanctum Sanctorum, which had been passed down for countless years, always have a small number of archmages? In addition to talent requirements, character and temperament were even more crucial. The Sanctum Sanctorum had always strictly screened apprentices, because once those with malicious intentions mastered magic, the harm caused would be immeasurable. Not to mention that the existence of the Vishanti Eternity Shield Array was top secret, and if it were to be destroyed by someone with ill intentions, the consequences would be unimaginable. Moreover, the destruction caused by battles between extraordinary powerhouses was far beyond what ordinary people could compare to. Ordinary people retaliating against society would at most cause limited casualties, but if an extraordinary powerhouse intended to cause chaos, the destructive power would be incomparable. Just like Magneto, if Yi Feng hadn't stopped him in time, he could have destroyed the entire New York. What you worry about is insignificant compared to the events that will be faced in the future. Ancient One said calmly, her eyes flashing with a light that saw through everything. As long as Yi Feng can live forever, he will be able to suppress all discordant voices. His potential far exceeds mine. She took a light sip of tea and continued, the Sanctum Sanctorum may usher in the most powerful sorcerer supreme in history. Even. Ancient One's voice carried a deeper meaning. Possibly surpassing Agamotto, the god of the Trinity. Hearing this, the Archmage's eyes widened in shock. Agamotto was a second-generation ancient god, an ancient being that existed since the beginning of creation, whose history was even longer than Hell Lord like Mephisto. He was also the creator of the Sanctum Sanctorum. Ancient One actually said that Yi Feng had the potential to surpass Agamotto. Did this mean that Yi Feng might also become a dimensional lord in the future? However, whether the Sanctum Sanctorum opens its doors to accept disciples, let Yi Feng decide. After all, that little fellow initiated this revolution. Ancient One smiled slightly. She knew that when he was ready to accept the position of Sorcerer Supreme, he had already been planning for this day. The Archmage system of the Sanctum Sanctorum was one of the important pieces in his construction of extraordinary order and social stability. It was just that the extraordinary system was not yet perfect, and Ancient One did not want to interfere too much in this matter. She didn't have much time left until retirement, about 10 years at most. It would be better to let Yi Feng worry about these things. Outside the Holy See, many mutants also came to pledge allegiance. With Yi Feng's current prestige in the world, there were quite a few people who came to pledge allegiance to the sanctuary and the Holy See. However, some screening was still needed. Similar to the Archmage's concerns, Yi Feng was also well aware of the drawbacks of widespread extraordinary powers. Therefore, attention still needed to be paid to the selection of Saint Seiya for the sanctuary. Once the other party became a gold Saint Seiya, every word and action would represent the sanctuary. The defection of a gold Saint Seiya would definitely be a severe blow to the sanctuary. He had a deep understanding of this in his previous life. Several defections of gold Saint Seiya in the Saint Seiya world almost ruined the entire sanctuary. Your Eminence, these are the files of the mutants who have recently come to pledge allegiance to the sanctuary. Clarice walked into Yi Feng's office area with a document. Leave it there. I'll look at it later. Yi Feng also hoped to select some suitable people. Currently, the Saint Seiya Legion was still too short-staffed and needed to be strengthened. Just as Yi Feng was about to flip through the thick stack of documents beside him, a sudden urgent ringtone broke the silence of the study. It was the dedicated line directly connected to the laboratory. Your Eminence, we have successfully acquired vibranium, but the quantity is very limited. As soon as the call connected, the researcher's slightly nervous voice came through. Oh, you've already made progress so quickly. Yi Feng put down the documents in his hand, raising an eyebrow slightly. Although he had long since ordered the collection of this special metal, he hadn't expected such high efficiency. Yes, but the cost was quite substantial. Vibranium is too rare, with extremely low output, and all major laboratories globally are competing for it. This small amount of raw vibranium we acquired cost over $10 million. The researcher's voice carried a hint of tremor. Yi Feng could hear heavy breathing on the other end of the phone. Clearly, the researcher was still startled by the astronomical cost. It's all right, funding is not an issue. I'll head to the laboratory now to take a look. Yi Feng responded calmly, then hung up the phone. The laboratory funded by the papacy was located within the sanctuary, only a few minutes' walk from his residence. This location was chosen specifically to allow him to participate in experimental tests at any time. Walking down the corridor leading to the laboratory, Yi Feng's mind was racing. His objective this time was clear, to attempt to use his element control ability to see if he could directly synthesize vibranium. But frankly, he wasn't entirely confident in this ability's efficacy. Limited by his original educational background and worldview, Yi Feng's understanding of element control was quite restricted. He was not a scientific genius like Tony Stark or Reed Richards, capable of creating devices that traversed the multiverse based on a deep understanding of physical laws. This forced him to think deeply about the nature of this world. Based on his observations and deductions, the physical laws of the Marvel Universe differed fundamentally from those of other worlds. The most typical example was He Who Remains, Kong, also known as Nathaniel Richards. As a descendant of Reed Richards, he, a mere mortal with exceptional intellect, created a device that traversed the multiverse, triggering a war that affected the entire multiverse. Even more astonishing, he eventually used technological power to converge the timelines of the entire multiverse, personally creating the sacred timeline. This was unimaginable on the ordinary Earth where he lived in his first life. Combining the foundational structure of the Marvel Universe, Yi Feng gradually formed some conjectures. It is well known that the fundamental laws of the Marvel world, in addition to time, space, and the four elements of earth, water, fire, and wind which form the basic framework of the world, also include more peculiar laws such as reality, soul, mind, and power. Yi Feng believed the problem lay in these special laws. After Thanos collected the 6 Infinity Stones, why did he only need a snap to wipe out half of all life in the universe? He had his own understanding. When the 6 Infinity Stones are gathered, they can fulfill any wish according to the user's will. The Time Stone determines the timing of the activation, the Space Stone defines the scope of impact, The Mind Stone interprets the user's will. The Soul Stone targets all life forms. The Reality Stone is responsible for modifying reality, and the Power Stone provides energy for all the processes above. The 6 stones each performed their duties, collectively realizing Thanos' insane plan. Based on this understanding, Yi Feng speculated that in the Marvel Universe, certain special individuals might be favored by the world's laws. He recalled Thanos' comment about Tony Stark in Avengers: Infinity War, a man cursed with knowledge. Did this mean that these favored children of destiny, to some extent, possessed the ability to directly transform thoughts into reality? In simpler terms, these gifted individuals likely possessed a certain degree of, I think, therefore it is, power. As long as they could conceive it and put it into practice, they would surely achieve a result. This was precisely where the fundamental laws of the two worlds differed. Of course, the exercise of this ability was still limited by their current level of understanding, but it was already sufficient to explain why so many counterintuitive black technologies emerged in the Marvel Universe. Among these, the influence of the reality law was particularly not to be underestimated. Lost in thought, Yi Feng had already arrived at the laboratory entrance. The heavy alloy door slid open to reveal the brightly lit interior. Guided by the researcher, Yi Feng finally saw the precious metal that had cost a fortune to acquire. This is vibranium, he murmured softly, the power of element control within him quietly operating, beginning to analyze the faintly glowing metal before him. The result of the analysis surprised him. Interesting. Its elemental composition does not match the ratios of any known natural or artificial substances. Rather than a metal, it's more akin to a mythical creation. Yi Feng frowned slightly. Although vibranium was classified as a metal, its essence was completely different from all metals he knew. Within its molecular structure, there was a substance he completely failed to comprehend. As divine power mixed in. Yi Feng mused thoughtfully. As a product unique to the Marvel Universe, vibranium had no trace in other parallel worlds. This metal had an extremely low initial melting point and could react with any known metallic element on Earth, with the resulting products exhibiting completely different properties. Adamantium and Captain America's shield were prime examples. However, what was puzzling was that if the first casting failed, the difficulty of subsequent processing would increase exponentially. Because once vibranium melted and re-solidified, both its hardness and melting point would sharply increase. It was the same piece of metal, yet it underwent such a drastic change after only one phase transition, which was entirely unexplainable in traditional materials science. It seems it truly is related to the Celestials. Yi Feng sighed softly. In the records of the sacred timeline, when the celestial Tiamat awakened and was then sealed by Circe, the armor he wore was precisely adamantium, a secondary evolution of vibranium. From this perspective, vibranium was indeed a true divine creation, a special material born to protect the relatively fragile bodies of the Celestials. After a series of attempts, Yi Feng confirmed his current limit. Replicating vibranium through element control was not entirely impossible, but the efficiency was extremely low. At the current speed, a year's output wouldn't even be enough to forge a complete saint cloth. He had to temporarily abandon this idea. After all, he didn't have that much time to waste on this project. Perhaps only after comprehending the seventh sense, or even the eighth sense, would he be able to freely replicate this special metal in large quantities. However, it wasn't all bad news. At least the tests confirmed that vibranium's strength was indeed sufficient to bear the imprint of the cosmos, and it could engrave the power of constellations, which provided the most important material foundation for the manufacture of the saint cloth. What about the other metals I asked you to research? How is the progress? Temporarily setting aside the idea of replicating vibranium, Yi Feng turned to the researcher beside him and asked. We have already produced a preliminary version according to your requirements. However, there is still a significant gap from the standards you proposed. The researcher led him deeper into the laboratory. There, a cold gleaming metal armor was quietly displayed on a stand. Using existing technology, we have barely achieved some of the functions you requested, such as free expansion and retraction. But in terms of energy conduction and release, the effect is still far from ideal. As the researcher operated the control panel, the armor expanded and retracted in response. He pulled up a set of data, his brows furrowed, Once the energy output exceeds the threshold, the armor begins to melt. According to our calculations, among all currently known metals, only vibranium can fully withstand the full output of your special power. The existing imitations would not only fail to assist you but might even become a burden. After a pause, the researcher added, moreover, this armor is very heavy. Those who need it often cannot bear its weight, and those who can easily wield it no longer require this level of protection. We are still continuously improving it. By the end, his tone carried a hint of helplessness. To produce the first version of the sample in such a short time, you have already done very well. I don't demand that the Saint Cloth be able to help combatants of my or Logan's level, but I hope it can at least provide effective protection for Saint Seiya of Clarice and Anna's level. Yi Feng gently patted the researcher's shoulder. He surveyed the laboratory, his gaze firm. You can adjust the research direction, prioritizing ensuring that the Saint Cloth can be effective for the grassroots members of the Saint Seiya Legion. This will significantly increase their survival rate when carrying out missions. The research on vibranium can officially begin, there's no need to worry about funding. With the current influx of funds into the sanctuary, it's enough to support long-term research. I only have one request. Forge truly usable Saint Cloth. Even if it can only meet the needs of Bronze Saint Seiya initially, do you understand what I mean? Yi Feng gazed at the researcher, his tone solemn. I understand, Your Eminence. The researcher nodded solemnly. Before leaving the laboratory, Yi Feng cast one last glance at the unfinished Saint Cloth, letting out a soft sigh. It seemed he still had to consult the Ancient One. Besides vibranium, he only knew that Asgard's Uru god steel met the requirements for forging the Saint Cloth. As the dedicated material for Asgardian artifacts, Uru god steel possessed excellent energy conductivity and could even nurture its own cognition and soul. However, its hardness was indeed a weakness, as evidenced by Mjolnir being easily crushed by Hela. Even in subsequent timelines, while Mjolnir could still fight, this flaw could not be concealed. Perhaps, it was time to make a trip to Kamar Taj. If this world truly did not contain the 9 realms, nor Asgard, then he would have to consider other divine metals. Deep in the Rocky Mountains, in a secret laboratory hidden beneath a military base, Colonel Stryker sat alone in the dimly lit control center. Surrounded by flickering computer arrays, dozens of surveillance screens projected onto the cold metal walls. The air was filled with the pungent smell of disinfectant and machine oil, and the ventilation system hummed softly. Stryker stared intently at the news report in his hand, the headlines piercing his nerves like sharp blades. Mutants become special talents vied for by nations. The value of stable superhumans in the new era. From fear to acceptance, the changing social status of mutants. These foolish politicians, these ignorant masses. Stryker's knuckles were white from gripping the newspaper so hard, almost tearing and crushing it. His eyes gleamed dangerously in the dim light, and veins bulged on his forehead. The public opinion he had painstakingly cultivated for years was crumbling. The atmosphere of fear towards mutants, which he had so carefully fostered, was being completely shattered by the suddenly rising Pope of the Holy See. What he found most unbearable was that some mutants with stable abilities had actually become objects of envy and adoration for ordinary people. This completely went against his understanding of mutants. These monsters should forever live in the shadows, like rats in a gutter, never seeing the light. All of them. Fool them. Stryker slammed the reader against the wall, sending fragments flying. Like a trapped beast, he paced back and forth in the secret room, his roars echoing between the metal walls. Mutants should be annihilated, every last one of them. After a long time, he gradually calmed down, only his heavy breathing echoing in the room. He walked to the control panel, his aged fingers rapidly sliding across the touchscreen, bringing up a set of surveillance screens. In the screens, mutants captured from all over the world were held in specialized reinforced glass cells, many of them with vacant eyes, clearly enslaved by the master of illusions, mental control. Since this world has already forgotten the terror of mutants, then let blood and death reawaken that fear. A cruel glint flashed in Stryker's eyes. His original plan was to use Professor Charles's global telepathic ability to eliminate all mutants in an instant. But this plan completely changed after he witnessed the Battle of New York. The power displayed by that Pope of the Holy See was terrifying. Charles was as helpless as a baby before him. However, your naivety will be your greatest weakness. Stryker showed a strange smile. If that pope were a radical like Magneto, his plan would be impossible to implement. But the other party was clearly like Charles, harboring naive illusions about human nature. His gaze shifted to a corner of the surveillance screen, which showed a special prison located deep in the Colorado desert. Under Charles's protection, Magneto Eric was spared death but was imprisoned in that cage with a 24/7 power dampener. With the help of the Master of Illusions abilities, Stryker had already infiltrated it and planted a seed in the consciousness of this most powerful mutant. Prepare to activate the purification plan. Stryker said into the communicator, his voice as cold as ice. Colonel, should we wait for a more opportune moment? A hesitant reply came from the other end of the communicator. Now is the best time. Before the inhibitor serum becomes widespread, before those fooled mutants are fully integrated into society, we must act. Stryker said decisively. He pulled up an encrypted file, which detailed the list of controlled mutants and their ability assessments. Each name was marked with the expected destructive power and intimidation effect. This was the culmination of his years of effort, and his last chance to prove the mutant threat to this world. Just as he was about to activate the plan, in the penthouse office of Trask Industries in New York, a young assistant gently placed an encrypted file on the polished mahogany desk. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, neon lights had just come on, casting flickering light and shadow inside the room. Boss, Stryker's operation has entered its final phase. Do we need to intervene? Bolivar Trask, the short but sharp-eyed genius scientist, put down his water glass, glanced at the file, and a meaningful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. No need. His actions pose no threat to us, and he is too naive. He sat in his wheelchair, overlooking the bustling city nightscape below. The landscape for mutants has already changed. What supports this group now is not Charles, nor Eric, but the Pope of the Holy See. Stryker's plan is doomed to fail. The assistant thoughtfully pushed up his glasses, but the government's inhibitor serum. That's exactly the cover we need. And we already possess a more powerful weapon. Trask maneuvered his wheelchair to the control panel, which displayed laboratory surveillance and the research progress of the Sentinel robots. In a heavily protected isolation chamber, Mystique Raven's gene sequence was being precisely analyzed, and complex genetic codes constantly flickered on the 3D projection. She is a gift from God. Ordinary contact can only mimic appearance, but with blood and gene samples, she can perfectly replicate the abilities of any mutant. Trask's voice was filled with almost fanatical joy. In just a few months, thanks to this talent, the development of a new generation of Sentinel robots had broken through several key technical bottlenecks. Trask brought up a design blueprint, showcasing a 3-meter-tall silver-white robot, its surface covered with special material capable of simulating any mutant ability. Notify the R&D department to advance the Artificial Intelligence Combat Module test. I want to see the finished product by next quarter. Trask gave the order, his gaunt body trembling with excitement. Years of aspiration seemed to see the hope of realization at this moment. After the assistant left, Trask looked at Stryker's file again, chuckled, and shook his head. Don't worry, after you die, I will fulfill your dream for you. He naturally wouldn't tell Stryker that many of the mutants in the laboratory were actually specially supplied by him. How could a mere U.S. Army colonel possess such vast resources? And Stryker, unaware of all this, was making the final preparations for his doomed plan. In a secret laboratory on the lowest floor of the base, several controlled mutants were undergoing final adjustments. The Master of Illusion stood to the side, fine beads of sweat seeping from his forehead, clearly indicating that maintaining such large-scale mental control was a huge burden for him as well. Remember your mission. Make the world re-recognize the terror of mutants. Stryker said through the broadcast system. At the same time, in Kamar Taj at the foot of the Himalayas, Yifeng once again set foot in this tranquil sacred place. The afterglow of the setting sun spilled into the ancient courtyard, coating the flagstone path with a golden hue. Sorcerer Ancient One was, as usual, sitting at a stone table in the courtyard, sipping tea, as if she had never left. Upon closer inspection, the teapot in her hand was suspended in midair, slowly pouring out emerald green tea. What wind brings His Holiness the Pope here today? Ancient One looked up, a hint of teasing in her eyes, and pushed a freshly brewed cup of tea towards Yi Feng. Yi Feng smiled and sat down, taking the teacup. His fingertips inadvertently touched the cup wall, feeling the faint magical fluctuations contained within. I came to visit you, and to ask a few questions, by the way. Tell me. Ancient One gently waved her hand, and the surrounding air seemed to ripple slightly with her movement, a few fallen leaves tracing strange trajectories in the air. I want to confirm, in our universe dimension, does the Nine Realms system truly exist? Ancient One put down her teacup, her gaze profound, as if penetrating the barriers of space and time. Are you here for Uru God Steel? Is it the saint cloth you speak of? Unfortunately, the main pantheon of this universe is the Greek pantheon. Asgard does not exist here. Seeing Yi Feng's disappointment, she continued, however, when you are strong enough, you can visit Hephaestus, the god of fire and forging. As the sorcerer supreme of earth, even Zeus would give you some deference. Hephaestus, Yi Feng mused. This god is precisely the forger of the saint cloth in the Saint Seiya legend. In this world, the destroyer armor he helped create even assisted Odin in defeating the Celestials, although its subsequent performance was indeed somewhat disappointing. When can I meet these gods? When the pantheon restarts. Ancient One's gaze was profound. Soon. But you must be prepared, the Sanctum Sanctorum and the pantheon have never been allies. Modern humans lack reverence for the gods, which, to those self-important deities, is an unforgivable offense. Yi Feng nodded silently. In the known sacred timeline, Earth had long been regarded by various cosmic races as a subordinate force of Asgard. It wasn't until after Ragnarok, when the Asgardians relocated to Earth, that humanity truly gained a voice. Furthermore, there are still some dormant gods on Earth, and once they awaken, it will be a huge impact on the current world order. And the gods of this world have always been self-important. Sorcerer Ancient One, I wonder if humanity has the possibility of becoming a god. Yi Feng looked at her, wanting to know if he could obtain divinity through the gods. Of course, but it's best not to. Ancient One looked at Yi Feng. Your power system is very special. I have traveled through many parallel universes and have never seen the power of cosmos. There's no need to get involved in the muddy waters of the gods. The existence of the gods is essentially to assist the Creator in managing and maintaining the balance of the universe. They seem powerful, but they are governed by the Creator and are not as free as you imagine. She revealed some information. Creator. The Celestials. Yi Feng remembered the fleeting appearance of the Celestials in the Thor series within the Pantheon. They seemed to be guarding the Pantheon, and also supervising the gods. Unable to get the answer he wanted at Kamar Taj, Yi Feng, with a hint of helplessness, could only return to the sanctum. Om. A subtle yet uniquely rhythmic dimensional fluctuation, like a stone cast into a calm lake, quietly spread out. Yi Feng keenly sensed this fluctuation and looked up at the eastern sky. This is. After sensing it for a moment, the corner of his mouth curved into a playful smile. Interesting. Kunlun Mountain. It seems to have declined, though. Yi Feng was not the only one to detect this fluctuation. The hand, hidden in the shadows of the city, at its core, its 5 leaders almost simultaneously felt a sensation. Has the gate of Kunlun Mountain opened again? Madame Gao leaned on her cane and slowly walked to the window, her cloudy but sharp eyes also looking eastward. That was the source of their extraordinary power, and the legendary martial arts holy land, Kunlun Mountain. Even though it had slightly declined due to the disappearance of certain ancient existences, Kunlun Mountain's profound heritage still pressed like an invisible mountain on the hearts of those in the know. HMPH. Those troublesome fellows are going to step into the mundane world again. Murakami's voice was cold, carrying undisguised disgust. The opening of the gate of Kunlun Mountain meant that a new Iron Fist had been born. Every generation of Iron Fist had made it their mission to eliminate traitors like them. But it's just another Iron Fist. Over the years, haven't enough Iron Fists fallen into our hands? If Kunlun Mountain truly cared about that dragon bone, we would have been annihilated long ago. Alexandra interjected, her tone filled with disdain. Shou Lao's cycle is once every 10 years. For Kunlun Mountain, losing a dragon bone is indeed not a significant loss. They remain transcendent, aloof from the mundane world, high above. As long as that one doesn't leave Kunlun Mountain, we don't need to worry too much. Madame Gao snorted coldly. However, a very deep hint of apprehension quickly flashed in the depths of her eyes. At the mention of that one, the expressions of the five-hand leaders present, including Madame Gao, subtly changed. They didn't even dare to directly mention her name, fearing to attract attention from the unseen. She was known as the most outstanding and strongest Iron Fist in Kunlun Mountain's history, hailed as the victor over gods. Her talent was so extraordinary that even the gods of Kunlun Mountain at the time marveled at her. If she hadn't needed to preside over Kunlun Mountain, suppressing a crucial dimensional passage, the five of them would not have been able to successfully steal the dragon bone and escape that holy land back then. Recalling their arrogance when they first entered the mundane world, believing they could be invincible with the power of the dragon bone, they encountered setbacks one after another during the establishment of the hand and witnessed many extraordinary forces hidden beneath the surface. Only then did they truly understand their own insignificance. Even with the dragon bone, which could create black sky, they were still vulnerable in the face of true powerhouses. Left with no choice, the hand had to change its strategy, surviving cautiously on the fringes of the extraordinary world like rats in a gutter. At the same time, far away on the roof of the world, at the peak of Kunlun Mountain, a figure sat quietly on the ice-covered cliff, her aura subtly merging with the entire Kunlun Mountain range, as if she had been sitting there for countless years. Suddenly, her tightly closed eyes snapped open, a golden-red glimmer flashing within them, like a sleeping phoenix awakening. She frowned slightly, sensing the subtle pull that transcended space. I didn't expect that, after several centuries, a new host would appear on Earth again, and they would resonate with each other. Wu Fengji, the strongest Iron Fist in Kunlun Mountain's history, felt a hint of surprise. She could not only perfectly utilize Kunlun Mountain's qi but had also once subdued Shoulao and inherited the immense dragon power. Centuries ago, she had used the combination of these two to forcefully shatter the descending Phoenix Force and eventually became the host of the Phoenix Force, reaching an inconceivable level of strength. It was also then that she discovered the dangerous passage hidden beneath Kunlun Mountain, leading to a certain dark dimension. Therefore, she chose to stay here, guarding this world's gateway with her supreme power. The former gods of Kunlun Mountain had long since perished in ancient wars. Although Kunlun Mountain is still a martial arts holy land, it seems somewhat desolate now. Sensing the fluctuation of another Phoenix Force, Wu Fengji didn't pay too much attention. That power was still weak, far from comparable to hers. She just shook her head gently and murmured, "I hope you won't be led into the abyss of destruction by this power." Then, she closed her eyes again, immersing herself in deep meditation. She knew very well that once this period's gate of Kunlun Mountain closed, this temporary pulling force would naturally dissipate, causing no substantial impact on her or the new host. However, this sudden fluctuation of the Phoenix Force caused quite a stir elsewhere. Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. Buzz. A violent, destructive energy burst forth without warning, and a crimson-gold energy ripple instantly swept across the entire academy. The walls trembled slightly, and glass instruments emitted a strained hum. Charles, in his office, his face suddenly changed, and cold sweat instantly seeped from his forehead. How could this happen? He immediately directed his consciousness to the source of the energy burst, Jean Grey's room. The psychic cage he had set deep in Jean's mind to suppress the terrifying power was now violently shaking, with even tiny cracks appearing on it, as if it could completely shatter at any moment. Why? Why did this power suddenly go berserk without any warning? Charles was filled with anxiety and confusion. He knew better than anyone how terrifying the power hidden within Jean was, an Omega-level mutant, possessing the terrifying ability to annihilate all matter. It was the ultimate power he had ever seen, enough to make any so-called strong person seem insignificant. In his cognition, even Pope Yifeng, now hailed as the strongest on Earth, could not directly contend with this pure destructive power. He fully activated his psychic abilities, and vast mental power surged out like a tide, desperately reinforcing the crumbling psychic barrier. Time passed minute by minute, and Charles's face gradually turned pale, his mental power being consumed like a floodgate opened. Several hours later, the raging Phoenix Force within Jean Grey finally gradually subsided, once again suppressed deep within her mind. What exactly happened? Charles slumped in his wheelchair, gasping for breath, his entire body drenched in sweat. To maintain the barrier, he had almost exhausted all his mental power. At this moment, he felt a splitting headache and was extremely weak. Fortunately, the worst did not happen. However, the immense energy index generated by Jean's unusual power surge this time had been captured by many eyes constantly monitoring Xavier's school. Such an astonishing energy reading, it actually exceeded Magneto Eric's previous highest record. In a secret military base, General William Stryker looked at the data fed back on the screen, his expression grim. Almost at the same time, Dr. Bolivar Trask also received similar intelligence. As New York's largest and most public mutant gathering place, Xavier's school had always been a close object of attention for various forces. Jean Grey's loss of control this time was like a torch lit in the darkness, it was hard not to attract attention. The destructive power contained in that energy, even through cold instrument data, could make people feel a pang of fear. At this moment, both Stryker and Trask felt a hint of wavering, questioning some of their extreme plans. But in the end, a fierce look reappeared in William Stryker's eyes, and he slammed his fist on the control panel. Since it goes berserk, it means this power is unstable, and she cannot fully control it. This is my opportunity. He suddenly turned his head, his gaze falling on the man sitting in the wheelchair behind him, with empty eyes, master of illusion, Jason Stryker. This was his last and most important trump card, his ultimate guarantee for implementing that insane plan. He no longer had much time to hesitate. This powerful energy fluctuation not only attracted the attention of these mortals but also alarmed several existences at the apex of the world's power. The Ancient One in Kamar Taj, and Yi Feng, who had just returned to the sanctum, almost simultaneously cast their gaze in the direction of Westchester County. This is the fluctuation of the Phoenix Force. It was actually triggered at this time. Yi Feng raised an eyebrow with a hint of surprise. He could clearly sense the terrifying characteristic within that power, capable of incinerating all things. He naturally knew of the Phoenix Force's existence and whose power was fluctuating. This ancient power was renowned throughout the Marvel Universe. It was known as one of the three great powers, alongside chaos magic and fairy power. Was it influenced by some kind of pull? Is it related to the opening of the gate of Kunlun Mountain? Yi Feng pondered, combining it with the dimensional fluctuation he had sensed from the east earlier. He recalled the information in his mind. In Kunlun Mountain's history, there was indeed an Iron Fist who had intersected with the Phoenix Force, but that person should have already disappeared. But now, it seemed that the strongest Iron Fist named Wu Fengji was likely still alive and remained in Kunlun Mountain. Kunlun Mountain, Taro. These ancient secret realms seem to hide many secrets. Yi Feng's fingers lightly tapped the armrest of his seat. He remembered the Soul Eater sealed in the Taro secret realm, a dimensional demon god capable of destroying the entire Taro civilization. The dark dimension it resided in, like the Taro secret realm, was a pocket dimension attached to Earth itself. Because of this special nature, even the protective array set up by the Vishanti found it difficult to completely block the intrusion of such entities. And they were ultimately sealed or suppressed within these secret realms. Now that Wu Fengji presided over Kunlun Mountain, coupled with the fading aura of the gods of Kunlun Mountain itself, Yi Feng had reason to speculate that it might also be connected to a powerful and dangerous dimension. Qi. Yi Feng's fingertips tapped lightly on the armrest of his seat, his thoughts sinking into the deduction of this unique energy system. The Qi, passed down in ancient secret realms like Kunlun and Ta Lo, is indeed a peaceful and greatly potent way of utilizing energy. In his judgment, the upper limit of this cultivation system is enough to allow a practitioner to touch the threshold of the sixth sense. After all, the ultimate performance of successive Iron Fists empowered by the dragon's power falls within roughly this scope. But the true value of Qi lies in its universality. This power system is complete, its cultivation method gentle, and almost everyone can begin to practice it, perfectly filling the gap between ordinary people and cosmos cultivation. If the two systems can be smoothly integrated, it could even significantly shorten the time needed to cultivate the cosmos. For Yi Feng, this is undoubtedly a major benefit. The larger the base of cosmos cultivators, the greater the power he receives in return, and his strength will naturally improve. It's time to settle the old score with the hand. A cold glint flashed in Yi Feng's eyes. The hand sent people to assassinate him, and he had always kept that in mind. It was just that he had been tied up with various important matters and had no time to deal with it. Now that the gate of Kunlun has reopened and the new Iron Fist is about to step into the mortal world, Yifeng doesn't mind doing a favor and clearing out the hand for Kunlun first. Whether it's to access Kunlun's unique Qi cultivation system or to explore the mysteries of the Ta Lo secret realm, the hand is an excellent starting point. Logan, come here. Yi Feng's voice, through the resonance of the cosmos, directly entered Logan's mind as he was on the training ground. On my way. Logan, who was instructing the Saint Seiya reserves, immediately responded. He made a pause gesture to his trainees and quickly turned to walk towards the core area of the sanctuary. A mission. Logan pushed open the door to Yi Feng's office and asked directly. Something like that. Here's some intelligence on the hand collected by the papacy and other factions. Yi Feng handed a stack of documents to Logan. The hand. You finally remembered to deal with these guys. Logan raised an eyebrow as he flipped through the documents. He recalled the strange ninjas he had encountered before. According to Clarice, these guys had once plotted to assassinate Yi Feng. The hand is connected to a transcendent power behind it. I'm very interested in that power's cultivation method. Moreover, such an organization shouldn't continue to exist. Yi Feng explained. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the Saint Seiya reserves training below. For this mission, you can take the Saint Seiya reserves with you, consider it practical combat experience. In Yi Feng's assessment, although the hand possesses some extraordinary abilities, its overall strength can at most be considered second-rate. With Logan's current strength, he can handle it completely. This is a good opportunity to train new recruits. Oh, and be sure to preserve the hand's documents and records, do not destroy them. Yi Feng turned and added. The sanctuary's path to the transcendent has just begun, and its foundation is still shallow. The black sky created by the hand using dragon bones and beasts is an excellent training target. Understood. Logan nodded solemnly. Yi Feng took out his holy tome, its pages turning without wind, emitting a soft and sacred glow. Just in case, I'll give you a few more things. As he spoke, 3 glowing cards flew from the pages and slowly landed in Logan's hand. These are 3 magic cards, Swords of Revealing Light, Monster Reborn, and Storm. Their specific effects and usage methods are recorded on the cards. Logan carefully examined the cards in his hand. He had witnessed Swords of Revealing Light before, which once single-handedly suppressed thousands of fallen holy souls. The effect of Monster Reborn was even more astonishing. Although it couldn't truly resurrect the dead, as long as there was still a breath left, it could bring them back. Storm was a practical card specifically used for clearing traps and barriers. With these 3 trump cards, Logan felt more confident about this mission. After bidding farewell to Yi Feng, he immediately returned to the training ground. Everyone, assemble. We have a mission. Logan's voice echoed over the training ground. Hearing this news, all the Saint Seiya reserves' eyes lit up. Especially Estelle and Wright, who had been diligently cultivating their cosmos since joining the Saint Seiya reserves. Their physical fitness had now reached the limit of ordinary people, and they eagerly awaited a real combat experience to test their growth. Me too. Johnny pointed to himself with some surprise. That's right. The power within you hasn't been fully developed yet. Although His Holiness has planted the seed of the cosmos within you, at the current rate, it's uncertain when you'll awaken it. Don't you want to reclaim your soul as soon as possible? Logan said with certainty. After training in the sanctuary, Johnny could now initially control the power of the Ghost Rider within him, temporarily preventing any rampages. However, there was still a long way to go to completely transform Hellfire into angelic flame. This is the Saint Seiya Legion's first collective mission. I hope you won't disappoint His Holiness's expectations and won't bring shame to the sanctuary. Remember, once the Saint Seiya move out, the eyes of the entire world will be on us. If anyone messes up. Logan scanned the crowd, his tone serious. He didn't finish, but everyone understood the gravity of his words. When facing transcendent organizations, one can never be too cautious. Understood. Everyone responded in unison, their eyes gleaming with determination. At the same time, the old pope also received news that the Saint Seiya were about to embark on a campaign. Oh. It seems nothing major has happened recently. The old pope looked slightly surprised. He is currently mainly responsible for the administrative affairs of the sanctuary. His Holiness the Pope said this is a training mission and requires the papacy and the sanctuary conglomerate to fully cooperate. The cardinal who came to report said respectfully. The old pope smiled with relief upon hearing this. It seems the seeds we sowed are growing vigorously. The cardinal beside him also nodded with emotion. The papacy had always been open to the power of mutants, and before Yi Feng appeared, the old pope had even adopted some mutant children to rebuild the papacy's prestige. Now, Clarice, as a mutant representative, has become a core force among the Saint Seiya, which is undoubtedly the best reward for their past good deeds. News of the Saint Seiya Legion's departure quickly spread to all parties. The sanctuary specifically sent formal notifications to various countries, stating that this operation was solely for a training mission, to eliminate a cancerous organization in the transcendent world, and hoped for cooperation from all nations. Saint Seiya. High-ranking officials from various countries reacted differently after receiving the news. After several major incidents, Yi Feng, Logan, and Clarice had already proven the power of the Saint Seiya with their strength, and no one dared to underestimate this emerging transcendent force. And the Saint Seiya's first stop was still New York City. This news gave U.S. high-ranking officials a headache, yet they couldn't directly refuse. After all, the transcendent agencies they had established still needed to acquire a large amount of supplies from the papacy. After the first batch of transactions, they had to admit that Pope Yi Feng's attainments in the transcendent field far exceeded imagination. The supplies traded in card form, though expensive, were remarkably effective. Only authorized individuals could activate and use them, and they came with special anti-counterfeit markings. Some high-ranking officials personally experienced them and confirmed the effects described in secret meetings. For these reasons, papacy personnel are highly respected worldwide. Towns and cities with churches and priests stationed often have significantly higher property values, a lingering effect of multiple demon incidents, with the U.S. being an exception. Because several transcendent incidents have occurred on U.S. soil, some even suspect if it's related to the papacy. Although investigations show otherwise, this apprehension persists. Did the sanctuary specify what cancerous organization they are dealing with? A U.S. high-ranking official asked with a frown. It's an assassination organization called The Hand. When Yi Feng dealt with the vampire incident, The Hand was hired by the Rockefeller family and sent assassins to kill him. Now it's probably time for reckoning. The intelligence officer immediately reported. Hearing this explanation, the high-ranking official breathed a sigh of relief. In that case, we don't need to interfere. Such an organization deserves to be wiped out. The Hand operates many underground businesses in the United States, with ties to several financial groups and gangs. They were happy for the sanctuary to step in and eradicate them. Soon, the underground world was abuzz with this news. News that the sanctuary was going to act against the Hand spread like wildfire, causing a huge sensation. Ha! These rats have finally kicked an iron plate. I'd love to know if your dragon bones can continue to revive under the papacy's encirclement. Many organizations that had grievances with the Hand watched gleefully, while at the Hand's headquarters, the 5 leaders gathered, the atmosphere heavy. Madame Gao stood before an altar emitting an eerie red glow. In the center of the altar lay a complete dragon skeleton. The papacy. Madame Gao's face was ashen, her cane striking the ground heavily. Things have come to this, we absolutely cannot sit back and do nothing. Issue the order, even if we die, we must take 2 of the papacy's teeth with us. Leader Murakami said coldly. Ninjas in the darkness began to mobilize, a storm was imminent. At the same time, Logan and others had already landed on the soil of the United States. I didn't expect this country to be the one I visit the most. Clarice said with some emotion. It seemed that most recent events had occurred in this country. Let's go, don't waste time. Those guys in the gutter should know we've arrived. Logan showed a slight smile. Being able to walk openly on the streets, enjoying the feeling of being revered by thousands, seemed quite nice. The papacy's private jet was very conspicuous. As soon as Logan and the others emerged, they were noticed by many people. Is that Saint Seiya? Oh my god, it really is the papacy's Saint Seiya. Mr. Logan, the gold Saint Seiya of Taurus, and Clarice, the Queen of Space. Logan and the others' popularity had already reached that of A-list superstars worldwide. The papacy even released some Saint Seiya merchandise, making a considerable profit. Under the arrangements of the sanctuary conglomerate, Logan and his group smoothly checked into a luxurious hotel under the conglomerate's banner. This hotel was located next to Central Park in New York, one of the most prosperous and sought-after areas in the entire city. As night fell, looking out from the floor-to-ceiling windows of the guest room, the brilliant lights of New York poured down like a river of stars, forming a stark contrast with the tranquil darkness of Central Park. Late at night, Logan sat alone on the sofa in his suite, with a large number of files and materials about the hand beside him. The dim yellow light of the table lamp illuminated his chiseled face, outlining his focused profile. Unbeknownst to him, he had transformed from a lone wanderer into a trusted pillar of the team. Compared to his aimless life of over 100 years, he felt that this goal-oriented life, striving for something, was what he truly desired. Logan. A familiar voice echoed in his mind without warning. Logan's eyes narrowed, and his brows furrowed instantly. How could he forget that voice? When he and Yifeng were on the run, Charles had similarly invaded his consciousness without permission, forcing a conversation with Yifeng. Now, the fact that the other party dared to contact him in such a way surprised him somewhat. Charles. You certainly have the nerve to come looking for me. Logan replied coldly in his mind. Logan, there are some things we need to discuss properly. Charles's voice carried an undisguised weariness, as if every word consumed his dwindling energy. Clearly, the excessive consumption of his mental power had not yet fully recovered. Time, place. Logan was concise. Now that he had grasped the mysteries of the cosmos, the mental barrier condensed within his body was impregnable. In terms of the sheer quantity of mental power, he might not be Charles's equal, but the defense constructed by the cosmos was absolutely not something ordinary telepathy could break through. Tomorrow afternoon, I will send you the address. Charles responded immediately. Jean Grey's unexpected rampage had drained his mental power, and if it had lasted any longer, he would have been powerless. At this moment, he had to admit that Yifeng's warning to him earlier was correct. He had set up multiple psychic barriers in Jean's mind since she was young, believing he could ensure decades of safety, but reality had dealt him a heavy blow. After receiving the address from Charles, Logan decisively cut off the mental connection. Charles had originally intended to visit Yifeng directly, but recalling their unpleasant last meeting, and Yifeng's foresight in predicting Jean Grey's potential danger, he ultimately abandoned the idea. In contrast, while Logan's attitude was firm, he was at least willing to communicate. Some information, conveyed to Yifeng through him, might be more readily accepted. Moreover, the destructive power displayed during Jean Grey's rampage indeed threatened the continued existence of all human civilization. What exactly is this old man plotting? Logan muttered to himself. In terms of actual age, he was far older than Charles, but in terms of cunning and strategy, he admitted he was not the other's equal. The next day, Logan made some arrangements for his affairs and then set off for the address provided by Charles. Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. Is this his so-called mutant sanctuary? How ridiculously naive. Logan stood before the exquisitely decorated wrought iron gate, surveying the magnificent manor before him, and let out a sarcastic laugh. Even someone as powerful as Yifeng had set up multiple barriers around the sanctuary to prevent malicious individuals. Yet, this Xavier's school stood so prominently, almost as if announcing to the world, mutants gather here, welcome to find us. This unguarded confidence, in Logan's eyes, was somewhat foolish. Welcome, Logan. Storm, Aurora, was already waiting at the gate, her silver-white hair gently fluttering in the breeze. Let's skip the pleasantries. Where is Charles? My time is limited. Logan was expressionless, his tone stiff. In fact, Yifeng had not set a time limit for this meeting, he simply did not want too much involvement with Charles. As Yifeng had said, Eric and Charles, as the two major leaders of mutants for decades, had never truly secured the rights and status that the mutant community deserved, but instead, had gradually pushed their race into deeper difficulties. In contrast, Yifeng's actions in just over a year had brought about a world of difference in their impact on mutants. Aurora sensed Logan's undisguised aloofness, said nothing more, and silently led him through the courtyard to Charles's office. Professor, Mr. Logan has arrived. She lightly tapped on the door and stepped aside to let Logan enter. Welcome, Logan. Charles sat in his wheelchair, his face much more haggard than when they last met, and frighteningly pale, as if he had aged several years overnight. You are. What happened? Logan looked at the other party in surprise. The Charles before him was a completely different person from the image in his memory, but recent news had not mentioned any large-scale conflicts erupting among mutants, which left him somewhat puzzled. I invited you here this time hoping you could convey some information to His Holiness the Pope for me. You know, our last meeting was not pleasant. But for this matter at hand, the only solution I can think of is His Holiness the Pope. Charles's voice was weak but sincere. Logan pulled out the chair opposite and sat down, leaning slightly forward. Tell me. This matter concerns the evolutionary level of mutants. Logan, are you familiar with the classification of mutant abilities? Charles took a deep breath, looking at Logan with a solemn gaze. No. Logan shook his head decisively. In the past, he was either on the battlefield, wandering the wilderness, or trapped in a laboratory, and even when he occasionally stayed in a city, he was mostly drinking in bars, never paying attention to such theories. Based on my years of research and observation, mutant abilities can generally be divided into 6 levels, ranked from low to high according to their potential and danger. They are the epsilon level, delta level, gamma level, beta level, alpha level, and the highest, omega level. Charles slowly explained. He paused and continued. Measured by this system, you belong to the beta level mutant, with stable and controllable abilities. As for Eric and I, we are classified as alpha level. And His Holiness the Pope. In my proposed mutant classification system, he is an omega level. During our last meeting, the power contained within him was like an boundless deep sea, unfathomable. Alpha-level mutants already possess the strength to threaten the national security of a country. If they unleash their full power without restraint, it would cause irreparable disaster. For example, if I were to fully release my mental power, I could instantly annihilate the consciousness of all intelligent life in New York. And as for Eric's ability, you should be clearer about his destructive power than I am. Logan patiently listened to the lengthy classification theory, his brows furrowing tighter and tighter. So, you called me here just to promote your classification system. He admitted that this classification was very detailed, encompassing most situations among mutants, but in his opinion, it was meaningless. This practice of dividing mutants into different classes not only did not help improve the situation of mutants, but would exacerbate internal division and opposition. Perfect mutants were highly respected, possessing the power to move mountains and seas, living in luxury, while lower-level mutants had to endure the backlash of their abilities, living a life worse than death, and might silently disappear in a laboratory one day. For this, neither Eric nor Charles could offer much help. If even mutants themselves use these standards to divide each other, how can they hope for equal treatment from humans? Logan thought to himself. In contrast, the transcendent social system built by Yi Feng, dedicated to perfecting mutant genes and helping them control their own abilities, was the true path to the future. If this system could be perfected, even epsilon-level mutants with the strongest side effects from their abilities would have hope of returning to normal life. This was the right way to save the race, not empty talk about level classifications. Of course not. The real reason I came to you is about an omega-level mutant. An existence of this level has the power to destroy the world. Once out of control, they can easily wipe out a country, or even an entire continent. Charles heard Logan's dissatisfaction and quickly got to the point. Logan's expression changed upon hearing this. You mean there's an omega-level mutant in this academy? He immediately thought of Yi Feng's unfathomable power. Leaving aside the power brought by the cosmos, just the elemental blessings Yi Feng bestowed upon him had already made him feel what true power was. If an existence of the same level went berserk, who could stop it? Yes, there is indeed one. Charles nodded heavily. She displayed extraordinary talent since childhood and has been peaceful for over 10 years. But just yesterday, she suddenly lost control and went berserk. To suppress the power she unconsciously released, I exhausted all my mental energy. Fortunately, it didn't last long, otherwise. Mentioning the harrowing scene from yesterday, Charles still had lingering fear in his eyes. So, you want to ask His Holiness to intervene and restrain that Omega-level mutant if she goes berserk again. Logan understood the other's intention. Exactly. On Earth today, the only ones capable of doing this that I can think of are His Holiness the Pope and one other existence. But the other one, I cannot contact. Charles admitted frankly. Logan's heart stirred slightly. There was actually an existence on Earth that could rival Yi Feng. This was unexpected information. I understand. I will convey your message truthfully. But whether His Holiness agrees is not something I can decide. Logan stood up and adjusted his collar. Watching Logan's resolute departing back, Charles's gaze was complex and hard to describe, his changes too great. When we first met, he was like a beast trapped in a cage, but now he has become a wise man capable of standing on his own. Pope Yi Feng, what kind of charm do you possess? Inside a laboratory at Empire University, cold instruments hummed rhythmically, reflecting Victor Von Doom's solemn face. His slender fingers glided across the control panel, turning off the still flashing indicator lights, a flicker of unconcealed disappointment in his eyes. Failed again. His voice echoed in the empty laboratory, tinged with fatigue and confusion. Before him, the precise instrument, the sole resonance device he had spent months designing, was now silent, its screen displaying only a steady straight line, devoid of any fluctuations he had hoped for. The laboratory door slid open softly, and Reed Richards walked in, holding a stack of documents. He looked at Doom's rigid back, then glanced at the unresponsive equipment, and couldn't help but sigh. Victor, I think there might be a problem with our experimental direction. These data are completely inconsistent with our theoretical model. This is no longer the research direction we initially assumed. Reed placed the documents on the workbench, his tone cautious. Doom slowly turned, a complex light flickering in his eyes. No, you don't understand the significance of this research, Reed. To achieve the results I envision with a mortal body, it's almost an impossible task. His voice was mixed with frustration and stubbornness. Doom knew better than anyone that his mother's soul was imprisoned by Mephisto, and by technology alone, he couldn't reclaim anything from the Hell Lord. As the son of Cynthia Von Doom, he inherited his mother's magic talent. In the hidden supernatural world, his magic attainments were comparable to those of the Sanctum Sanctorum's mages. But he had never revealed any of this to Reed. So what are you going to do now? Reed asked with concern, his gaze sweeping over the scattered blueprints and calculation formulas on the experimental table. Before Yi Feng appeared, Reed had always considered Doom's obsession with soul research to be almost absurd. But out of curiosity for the unknown realm of science, and trust in his friend, he still participated in these experiments. It wasn't until Yi Feng's public speech at the United Nations conference, confirming the existence of hell and demon gods, that Reed began to rethink the entire research direction. Doom took a deep breath, as if having made up his mind. Go to Sanctuary, find Pope Yi Feng. He can help me. Sanctuary. Have you seen the news? The Saint Seiya of Sanctuary are in New York. If you want to contact Sanctuary, this might be the best opportunity, Reed mused. Doom suddenly looked up, hope rekindled in his eyes. What did you say? The Saint Seiya are in New York. That's right, it's said to be for the purpose of eradicating a notorious supernatural organization. If you want to seek help from Sanctuary, I suggest you try your luck at the Sanctuary conglomerate. Victor, all these things happening in the world recently. I guess there are some things you haven't told me. But no matter what, you are my friend. Reed paused, then added thoughtfully. Doom was slightly moved, nodding gently. Thank you, Reed. This news is very important to me. He quickly packed his belongings, putting some key research materials and personal items into his briefcase. After bidding farewell to Reed, he hurriedly left the laboratory and hailed a taxi at the campus gate. To the Sanctuary conglomerate building. Doom told the driver, unconsciously revealing a hint of urgency. The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror and smiled. Looking at you, are you going to chase stars? Chase stars. Doom didn't react for a moment. That's right, the Saint Seiya of Sanctuary. They are currently staying in the 5-star hotel beneath the Sanctuary conglomerate. I heard they are here to carry out some special mission. These days, many young people are rushing there just to catch a glimpse of the Saint Seiya. Whose fan are you? Taurus Gold Saint Seiya Logan? Or Space Queen Clarice? the driver said excitedly while skillfully turning the steering wheel. When talking about the Saint Seiya, the driver immediately opened up, recounting various media reports about the Saint Seiya as if they were his own treasures. Doom was a little surprised. Are the Saint Seiya so famous already? Due to his long-term immersion in experiments, he paid little attention to popular culture. Although he had always kept an eye on news about Sanctuary and Popi Feng, he knew little about the Saint Seiya's influence on the public. But upon closer thought, it was not surprising. With the exposure of the demon invasion and the secrets of the Holy See, myths became reality, naturally attracting widespread attention and admiration from society. I'm not chasing stars, but I do want to meet the Saint Seiya. Doom responded politely, his gaze fixed on the rapidly receding streetscape outside the window. When the taxi arrived near the sanctuary conglomerate, Doom was stunned by the sight. Crowds of people gathered around the conglomerate building, some holding banners, some holding cameras, all clearly ardent fans of the Saint Seiya. So many people. Doom muttered to himself, his heart sinking. Under such a siege, it would be almost impossible for him to meet the Saint Seiya or the senior management of the sanctuary conglomerate. After paying and getting out of the car, Doom stood at the street corner, gazing at the towering sanctuary conglomerate building in the distance, his heart in a struggle. Did he really have to go to sanctuary himself? But as far as he knew, sanctuary was now shrouded in a mysterious golden barrier, making it impossible for ordinary people to enter. Moreover, if he exposed himself as the son of a witch, with a dark magic background, how would sanctuary treat him? In the Middle Ages, witches were always hunted by the forces of light, and this prejudice might continue to this day. Perhaps I can start with their current mission. A flash of inspiration struck Doom, and he thought of a way. For years, he had mingled anonymously in the underground world, and had a deep understanding of New York's supernatural black market and various secret organizations. If he could provide valuable information, perhaps he could exchange it for an opportunity to talk with Sanctuary. Doom quickly found a nearby cafe that offered computer services, sat down, and began to write an email. He explained in detail his understanding of New York's underground world and expressed his willingness to provide assistance, only asking for a face-to-face exchange with the Saint Seiya. At the end of the email, he attached his resume. The title of a genius student from Empire University would at least add some credibility. For the next 3 days, Doom was restless in his dorm, constantly refreshing his inbox, afraid of missing a reply. Reed looked at his anxious appearance and couldn't help but ask, still no news. Doom shook his head, his fingers unconsciously tapping on the table. Maybe my approach was too presumptuous, or they simply don't need help from outsiders. Just as he was about to give up hope, his phone suddenly rang, a number from the sanctuary conglomerate. Is this Mr. Victor Von Doom? We have received your email and invite you to come for a detailed discussion tomorrow at 10 a.m. After hanging up, Doom rarely showed a smile. They agreed. Reed excitedly patted his shoulder. That's great. So you'll get to meet the Saint Seiya. Doom nodded, immediately sitting back in front of the computer. I need to prepare more detailed information. I can't waste this opportunity. The next day, the special car sent by the sanctuary conglomerate stopped punctually downstairs at the dorm building. Along the way, Doom repeatedly checked the information he had prepared, thinking about how to persuade the Saint Seiya to accept his help. Upon arriving at the hotel where the Saint Seiya were staying, Doom was led into a conference room. Sitting at the head of the table was Taurus Gold Saint Seiya Logan. He was even more burly and imposing than reported by the media. Simply sitting there quietly, he exuded an undeniable majesty. The staff of the sanctuary conglomerate briefly introduced him and then left the room, leaving Doom to face Logan and several other Saint Seiya. Space Queen Clarice leaned by the window, her sharp gaze scrutinizing him, while Johnny sat next to Logan, his expression relaxed but his eyes alert. After a moment of silence, Logan suddenly spoke, his voice deep and firm. You are a transcendent. Doom's heart skipped a beat, his prepared opening remarks all caught in his throat. There are magic fluctuations on you, Logan added, his gaze like a torch. Doom opened his mouth, but didn't know how to respond. He hadn't expected the Saint Seiya's perception to be so keen, seeing through his deepest hidden secret at first glance. I smell a dark aura. Does your magic originate from a witch? Johnny leaned forward, looking at him with interest. Doom was completely stunned. He hadn't said a word, yet his background had been thoroughly investigated. Logan observed his reaction and nodded gently. It seems we guessed correctly. You must have something to ask of Sanctuary, right? Tell us, what are your terms for the transaction? Doom took a deep breath, knowing that concealment was meaningless in front of these people, so he simply confessed, yes, I need Sanctuary's help. My mother, her soul is imprisoned by Mephisto in hell. I tried to use technological means to call her back, but all failed. I heard that Sanctuary has the ability to fight the forces of hell. He paused, seeing that Logan's expression hadn't changed, then continued, in exchange, I can provide all the information I know about New York's underground world. I know all about the organizations, black markets, and supernatural criminals hidden in the shadows. Logan exchanged a glance with Clarice, then slowly stood up and walked over to Doom. Mr. Doom, Sanctuary never deals lightly with dark magic users. Doom's heart sank, but Logan's next words rekindled his hope. However, we see your sincerity and understand your desire to save your mother. Therefore, we accept your proposal. Logan extended his hand. Doom clasped Logan's hand, feeling the other party's powerful cosmos, and at the same time, he made up his mind that no matter the cost, he would seize this opportunity to reclaim his mother's soul from Mephisto. Johnny, on the other hand, had a somewhat surprised look in his eyes. He hadn't expected someone to have the same request as him, which made him feel a bit closer to Doom. Deep within the base, the eerie blue glow of the surveillance monitors reflected on William Stryker's face, accentuating the uncontrollable smirk that twisted his lips. His fingertips tapped lightly on the table, creating a rhythmic, dull sound that was exceptionally clear in the silent command center. Even the heavens are helping me, he murmured, his voice trembling with an almost fanatical fervor. Saint Seiya. Sanctuary. If you all die out, who will be able to become the backbone of the mutants? This is an excellent opportunity. He picked up the thin intelligence file on the table, then slammed it back down, as if he had already firmly grasped its contents. He had originally felt that his actions might be a bit rushed and risky, but Sanctuary's public announcement to the world this time had undoubtedly handed him the opportunity on a silver platter. Logan was indeed a problem. Clarice's teleportation ability was also extremely threatening. But the numbers were too small. According to intelligence, there were only 7 people in total coming to New York this time. Aside from Logan and Clarice, who were already renowned throughout the world, the remaining 5 were reportedly mostly Saint Seiya reserves, with little fame and questionable strength. In Stryker's eyes, this was simply a godsend opportunity. The current world order was quietly changing due to Sanctuary and the mysterious Pope Yifeng, and the status of mutants seemed to be rising accordingly. This was something he absolutely could not tolerate. So, what if this highly anticipated Saint Seiya Legion was completely wiped out in New York? This would undoubtedly be a heavy blow to Sanctuary's burgeoning reputation. Even if Pope Yifeng had extraordinary means, it would be no easy task to restore their prestige in a short period. Can't wait any longer. It looks like I need to contact an old friend again. Stryker's eyes flickered with an unpredictable light, like a venomous snake lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity. He thought of the hand. In the past, he had several not-so-pleasant but ultimately satisfactory collaborations with this mysterious and powerful assassin organization, which had handled some mutant targets he found inconvenient to deal with himself. He believed he understood these ninjas who hid in the darkness. With his mind made up, Stryker immediately pressed the internal communication button and issued an order to his assistant, connect me to the hand's contact channel. Tell them we are interested in offering assistance. His assistant's crisp reply came from the other end of the phone, understood, officer. During the period when the Saint Seiya officially took up residence in New York, this bustling and chaotic metropolis exhibited a strange calm. Street crime, once rampant under the night sky, had almost vanished, and the various forces of the underworld seemed to have reached some kind of tacit agreement, all lying low. The city's crime rate plummeted to a historic low, even the New York Police Department found it incredible. Many media outlets began to extensively publicize this, attributing it all to the arrival of the Saint Seiya, praising them for bringing long-lost peace and order to New York. However, ordinary citizens and media reporters did not know that beneath this seemingly harmonious facade, Undercurrents were surging wildly, and a dangerous vortex had already formed. This was merely the suffocating calm before the storm. The hand, deep within its secret headquarters. Madame Gao's withered fingers twirled a string of bone prayer beads, and the first hint of a smile since Sanctuary issued its extermination notice appeared on her face. Interesting, I never thought that at this critical juncture, when everyone is on edge, someone would dare to proactively contact us. Her voice was hoarse, with a hint of playfulness. It seems there are more people in this world who dislike Sanctuary and that Pope than we imagined. That's not surprising, Madame Gao. Not everyone is happy to see Sanctuary rise, especially since, that Pope, is reportedly also a mutant. In some circles, this is an original sin. Murakami, sitting in the shadows, maintained his calm tone, like cold stone. In the mainstream view of the superhuman world, mutants occupy a rather awkward position, often even being equated with aberrations who practice dark magic. They are neither fully accepted by ordinary humans nor easily integrated into traditional superhuman systems. If not for the existence of some extremely powerful individuals among mutants, their situation would likely be even more difficult. Reply to them that cooperation is negotiable. But the prerequisite is that we must confirm the details and sincerity in person. Madame Gao pondered for a moment before making her decision. She was always cautious. At such a critical moment, any contact could be an opportunity, or it could be a trap. The appointed time quickly arrived. At a deserted industrial dock, the salty sea breeze carried the smell of rust and decay. Stryker, accompanied by only 2 fully armed guards, stood in the shadows of stacked containers. So, it's you. Madame Gao, surrounded by a group of black-clad ninjas, emerged slowly from the dark corner like a phantom. She looked at Stryker, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. She was not well acquainted with this military officer, but she knew of his existence, a radical known for his extreme hatred of mutants. The hand had indeed handled some dirty work for him in the past. At this moment, Madame Gao's last shred of doubt vanished. She had never met a human who hated mutants more than Stryker. How do you propose we cooperate? Regarding the combat power of the Sanctuary Saint Seiya, I believe you know more than I do. Magneto Eric is a prime example. Madame Gao cut straight to the chase, her tone grave. At the mention of Sanctuary and Eric's defeat, her expression also darkened a few shades. Sanctuary's openly issued extermination notice had put immense pressure on the hand. Such an undisguised declaration of war meant the opponent possessed absolute confidence. Coupled with the possibility of the Iron Fist, the successor of Kunlun, appearing at any time, the hand was currently besieged on all sides. Although Stryker's influence was primarily limited to the secular realm, at this moment, he was undoubtedly a valuable ally worth winning over. The plan is simple. We will join forces, set a trap, and kill every single member of this Saint Seiya squad, leaving none alive. Stryker's face appeared somewhat distorted in the dim light, his eyes flickering with a mad gleam. Are you insane? Do you not know what kind of power the Saint Seiya possess? How can you possibly think we can defeat them? Moreover, there's Logan, that almost immortal monster, among them. Madame Gao's expression changed drastically, her usual composure broken as her voice unconsciously rose. I naturally have my trump card. I have successfully gained control of a group of mutants, including Eric and the core members of his brotherhood. Stryker cut her off decisively, his face radiating the confidence of someone in complete control. This news he dropped moved both Madame Gao and Murakami. Stryker continued to press, his speech quickening. Now, with just one command from me, the entire power of the Brotherhood of Mutants can be at my disposal. However, our actions must be swift. He changed the subject. On the government's side, research into the mutant suppression serum has entered a critical stage. Once that thing successfully comes out, all the power I control will instantly vanish. The serum might succeed tomorrow, or a year from now, no one knows. Now, it's up to you, do you dare to take this gamble? Madame Gao fell into a long silence. The mutant suppression serum was indeed a potential ultimate trump card, but its uncertainty was too great. If, before that, they could use the forces controlled by Stryker to severely damage or even annihilate this active force sent by Sanctuary, then the pressure would be much less when facing Pope Yifeng alone with the suppression serum in the future. At present, the hand indeed had not much choice. Sanctuary's power deterred other factions from easily contacting them. All right. The Hand agrees to this cooperation. Madame Gao finally looked up, a fierce and resolute glint in her eyes. Excellent. I can be ready at any time. Stryker's face revealed a triumphant smile. The second step of his plan had finally been taken. We will meticulously design and release some key clues to guide the Saint Seiya to our headquarters. That will be the ultimate trap we set. What you need to do is secretly ambush all the forces in your hands there in advance. Once the Saint Seiya break into the core area, we will ensure they never return. Madame Gao quickly got into action, beginning to make arrangements. No problem. I will start deploying immediately. However, during the process of personnel transfer and ambush, I will need your assistance to ensure the operation is absolutely covert. Stryker nodded, then made his request. Although he controlled Eric and others, to secretly transfer these powerful mutants from tight security and get them into position for an ambush, relying solely on his own strength would inevitably leave traces. I understand. Notify us before the operation. Madame Gao agreed. The two sides quickly finalized some details of the cooperation, and then Madame Gao, with her subordinates, disappeared back into the darkness, as if she had never appeared. Stryker returned to the base, his excitement and fervor almost impossible to suppress. He seemed to already see the tragic deaths of the Saint Seiya and the collapse of Sanctuary's reputation in the future. Soon, it will be soon. He stared at the constantly scrolling data and reports on the computer screen, his gaze as sharp as a knife. Meanwhile, Doom was active in New York's intricate underground world, attempting to gather all information about the Hand. Thanks to his excellent abilities and Sanctuary's intelligence network, his investigation progressed surprisingly smoothly. Strange, it's almost too smooth. Doom stopped in the alley behind a noisy underground bar, his brow furrowed. The ease with which he had obtained information about the Hand through his covert investigations over the past few days made him wary. For an ancient and secretive assassin organization like the Hand, its core information should logically be tightly protected. But the reality was that it seemed as if the entire underworld was intentionally or unintentionally feeding him information about the Hand, quickly, directly, and with almost no significant obstacles. This abnormal smoothness made him smell a conspiracy. Doom paused slightly, subtly adjusting his body into a stance ready for both offense and defense. He keenly sensed that several figures, emanating a dark aura, had silently surrounded him in the dimly lit alley. A cold, palpable killing intent permeated from all directions. His fingers, hidden beneath his sleeve, twitched slightly. The magic runes, already etched on the inside of his clothing and skin, began to glow faintly, poised for action. Just when I thought things were going too smoothly, trouble arrived. I really shouldn't pop the champagne too early. Doom sneered inwardly, preparing to strike first. Just then, a clear, kill male voice abruptly rang out from the alley entrance, breaking the heavy standoff. What do you intend to do to our intelligence officer? Johnny Blaze's figure quietly emerged, his gaze like lightning as he swept over the black-clad ninjas revealing themselves from the shadows. With his arrival, the suffocating, kill atmosphere in the alley seemed to momentarily freeze. Doom felt a slight relaxation, but his guard remained up. The real battle, he suspected, was just beginning. You go back first, I'll handle things here. Make sure to deliver the collected information to Logan, completely intact. Johnny Blaze twisted his neck, his bones cracking crisply, a hint of long-suppressed excitement on his face. He rarely stretched, feeling the long-absent tension and relaxation in his muscles. While cultivating his cosmos diligently at the papacy during this time, and his power growing daily, he always felt his body was rusting. He was not one to stay still. Now that a battle had come to him, how could he miss this opportunity to stretch his limbs? Doom looked at the seemingly carefree man before him, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Kid, when this incident is over, we can have a good discussion about souls. Johnny seemed to read his mind, speaking without turning his head, his voice with a peculiar rasp. As soon as he finished speaking, Doom suddenly felt the air temperature around him rapidly rising, as if he had instantly jumped from a damp alley into the side of a furnace. The next second, his pupils suddenly contracted. He watched the figure in front of him in disbelief. That familiar head had transformed into a blazing, burning skull amidst the scorching flames. Hellfire surged and flowed around him, outlining a contorted yet sacred silhouette. Doom's heart trembled. The sight before him was utterly different from the sacred, bright style of the sanctuary. The pure, violent aura of hellfire almost assailed him. However, he didn't waste time and immediately turned to leave the alley. The flames around Johnny spread wildly from his feet, instantly illuminating the dark alley as bright as day. The hand ninjas, who had been hiding in the shadows, perfectly camouflaged by the darkness, now had nowhere to hide, each exposed by the flickering firelight. You are guilty. The iconic words spewed from the burning skull, raspy and filled with an undeniable sense of judgment. In Johnny's penance stare, every single one of these ninjas had their hands stained with innocent blood, their souls already blackened by sin, making them the best fuel. The ninjas in the shadows did not respond. Silence was their best weapon. Only the cold katanas in their hands sliced through the air, emitting sharp hisses, as countless icy glints, like venomous snakes, struck the flaming skull from all directions. Battle erupted instantly. Johnny, who had cultivated his cosmos, was no longer the spirit of vengeance who fought purely on instinct with a surge of anger and hellfire. Now, his combat skills and precise control over his power were many times stronger than before. Facing these battle-hardened, ruthless assassins, Johnny showed no signs of falling behind. His movements were as swift as lightning. Each swing of his flame-wreathed fists brought an explosive crack that tore through the air, striking the ninjas, katanas with precision, shaking them off or even melting them. His strength, speed, and reflexes, all his physical attributes far surpassed those of ordinary ninjas. The battle did not last long. Hellfire, for mortals, was an absolute conceptual weapon. Once it touched them, it struck directly at the soul. Piercing screams briefly erupted, then were quickly drowned out by the crackling of burning flames. Several ninjas turned to charcoal in the hellfire, their very souls completely annihilated under the scorching of the pure flames, without even a chance to be transformed into the black sky by the hands behind the scenes power. This time, the hand suffered a true, irreversible loss of members. When Doom returned to his hotel room with the data, Johnny arrived almost immediately after him, with only about a minute's difference. Johnny had already reverted to his human form, casually dusting off his leather jacket as if he had just taken a stroll. Doom looked at him in surprise, not expecting the battle to end so quickly. This made him fully realize that the power hidden within this seemingly ordinary man was far more terrifying than he had imagined. That flame, filled with the essence of hell and judgment. Kid, do you have time to talk now? Johnny leaned against the doorframe, looking at Doom. After several days of covert observation, he had basically confirmed that Doom harbored no ill will towards the sanctuary. Doom didn't hesitate, nodding. He, too, was curious about Johnny and his connection to hell. Logan, who was nearby, merely grunted, cigar in mouth, and did not intervene. He had also observed Doom during this time and felt that this young man's talent and temperament were both top-notch, making him a worthy candidate for recruitment. The only issue was the clear traces of black magic on him, but he believed Yifeng had the ability to resolve this. He was already preparing to report Doom's situation to the sanctuary. Johnny and Doom, one after the other, entered an empty conference room. Allow me to properly introduce myself. Johnny Blaze, the Ghost Rider who signed a contract with Mephisto. Currently, I am part of the Saint Seiya Legion of the Sanctuary. Johnny casually pulled out a chair and sat down, extending his hand to Doom. Victor Von Doom, son of a witch, currently a student at Empire State University. Doom shook his hand, his tone grave. He couldn't help but press further. I am very curious, Mr. Johnny. To my knowledge, those who sign contracts with Mephisto eventually have their souls harvested by him. Has he already taken your soul? Or have you found a way to break free from the contract? This was the question he cared about most. His mother, Cynthia, had her soul taken by that demon because she made a deal with Mephisto, and she was still suffering to this day. He knew Mephisto's cunning and evil better than anyone. Not at all. My soul is still in Mephisto's hands. However, due to the intervention of His Holiness the Pope, the contract between Mephisto and me has been somewhat interfered with and suppressed. As long as I don't die, Mephisto cannot easily use the power of the contract to directly torment me or forcefully take my soul. But this safety is temporary and conditional. Johnny shook his head, a complex expression on his face. Upon hearing this, the light that had just flickered in Doom's eyes dimmed again. He murmured, "So, that's how it is. Even the sanctuary can't directly oppose Mephisto. Then is there truly no hope for me to retrieve my mother's soul?" His voice carried a barely perceptible tremor. "You're being a bit too extreme, Doom. You may not fully understand Mephisto's true power. When he manifests in the real dimension, he often uses only a projection of his power. His true form possesses power far beyond your imagination. He is an ancient demon lord who has existed since the dawn of the universe, one of the great lords of the hell dimension. His very existence is almost conceptual. Do you truly believe that with your personal strength alone, even with the black magic you've studied, you could reclaim your mother's soul from his grasp?" Johnny looked at him, his tone becoming serious. At the same time, far away in the apostolic palace of the sanctuary, Yifeng was listening to Logan's report on the latest developments concerning Doom and the underworld through a special communication channel. When he heard that Doom had actively approached the Saint Seiya and had a conversation with Johnny, a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. "Doom, I didn't expect him to appear at this time," Yifeng murmured to himself. He was very familiar with this God Emperor, and Dr. Doom, who would be famous in countless Marvel parallel universes in the future. Especially in that storyline where he stole the power of the Beyonders and personally created an entirely new single universe, Doom's power almost reached the extreme of what a mortal could imagine. Who knows? With this guy's potential and his no-holds-barred approach, one day in the future, he might actually be able to snatch his mother's soul back from Mephisto with his own power. Yi Feng's lips curled into a slight smile as he spoke into the other end of the communication. Victor von Doom, a super genius with exceptional talent in both technology and magic, who would even establish his own nation of Latveria in the future. He played a pivotal role in countless major events. Such a genius, not yet fully grown, eager to save his mother, not yet disfigured by an experimental accident leading to psychological extremism, and not yet completely estranged from Reed Richards. If he could be recruited into the sanctuary at this opportune moment, it would undoubtedly be a tremendous boon. Recruiting Doom would, to some extent, also establish a subtle connection with the future Fantastic Four, as well as the Council of Reeds and Council of Dooms, scattered across the multiverse. Tell Johnny to keep Doom stable. Once this mission in New York is completely finished, bring him back to the sanctuary. I will speak with him personally about Hell, about Mephisto, and about his mother's soul. Yi Feng issued the command. I understand. Logan's voice came from the other end. Is there really no other way? Is Mephisto truly unconquerable? Doom lowered his head, his hands clenched into tight fists, knuckles white from the effort. Johnny's words had shattered years of his beliefs. He was unwilling to accept it. To save his mother's soul, he had sacrificed too much, delving into forbidden dark magic, constantly increasing his power. If all this was still meaningless before a true ancient god, then what was the point of all his efforts? No, hope is not entirely absent. Joining the sanctuary might be the most likely way to find the answer right now. His Holiness the Pope is the strongest and most incredible human I have ever met. His power grows at an astonishing rate every day, and his wisdom and vision far exceed the ordinary. If there is truly someone in this world who can help us find a way to fight Mephisto and achieve our long-held wish, then I believe only His Holiness the Pope has the ability to do it. Johnny's voice rang out again. He looked out the window, as if he could penetrate space and see the distant sanctuary. His words carried an undeniable conviction and faith. Doom suddenly raised his head, the almost extinguished fire in the depths of his eyes reigniting. Although still mixed with reluctance and doubt, there was more of a resolute determination. I understand. Once your mission in New York is over, I will go to the sanctuary with you. I also want to hear for myself what His Holiness the Pope says about Mephisto, and the future he can see. Doom took a deep breath, as if to expel the years of gloom and unwillingness accumulated in his chest. He had to go to the sanctuary. This was not only for his mother's soul but perhaps also to find a new possibility for his lonely and obsessive path. Just as Doom and Johnny finished their conversation, the atmosphere in another part of the hotel suite was even more solemn. How is it? Is the information Victor brought back useful? Clarice sat lightly on the windowsill, her gaze sweeping over the still bustling but secretly turbulent New York nightscape below, and asked. Anna, on the side, also turned her head, her ice-blue eyes looking at Logan, who was lost in thought while facing a communicator. They had both heard Logan's brief report to His Holiness Yi Feng, the Pope, and clearly understood the temporary team leader's intention. The sanctuary had shown interest in Doom, and their mission here had reached a critical point. They had been stranded in New York for over a week. Beneath the surface calm, the tension was growing. Some people, or rather, some forces, were probably already unable to hold back. Yes, in fact, extremely useful. The information Victor gathered is very detailed, almost marking out several important strongholds of the Hand in New York, and even their possible headquarters location. But Logan put down the communicator, his brow deeply furrowed, the smoke from the cigar between his fingers curling upwards. He paused, a beast-like intuition making him feel a hint of unease. I always feel like something isn't quite right. Everything seems too smooth. The Hand, as an assassin organization rooted in the underworld for many years, how could its core intelligence be so easily dug up by a college student? In these recent conflicts, the ninjas they sent seemed fierce, but it always felt like a test, or rather, they were deliberately sacrificing some irrelevant pawns, without much impact. After Logan comprehended the cosmos' sixth sense, he gained a superhumanly keen perception of potential dangers. At this moment, this perception was sending him faint warnings, as if something in the darkness was weaving a large net. Are we going to keep waiting? His Holiness the Pope is still waiting for our news in the sanctuary. The longer we delay, the more variables there will be. Clarice frowned. Her personality was more direct, and the long wait made her a bit anxious. No more waiting. We will act tomorrow. We will directly raid the location with the strongest indication in Victor's information. If it's a trap, we'll destroy it along with those who set it. Logan extinguished his cigar, a flicker of resolve in his eyes. If it weren't for Doom's sudden appearance and the crucial information he brought, they might have acted sooner. But now, with intelligence in hand, despite his doubts, Logan was confident that with their current strength, they could handle most challenges. His immortal body, coupled with the surge of power after comprehending the cosmos, was his greatest confidence. Meanwhile, deep beneath New York, in a Hand headquarters converted from ancient subway tunnels and abandoned air raid shelters, an atmosphere different from its usual eerie and sinister vibe, one mixed with anticipation and murderous intent, now permeated. Stryker stood in the dimly lit command room, looking at rows of mutants with hollow eyes, like puppets on a string, and uncontrollable smugness on his face. The core members of the Brotherhood of Mutants, led by Magneto Eric, now stood silently behind him, like the most loyal soldiers, awaiting their master's command. Their silent transfer from Heavy Guard relied not only on the powerful mind control abilities of the Master of Illusions, Jason Stryker, which twisted reality and perception, but also on the Hand's secret tunnels and transportation network, cultivated over years in the underworld, which played a crucial role. Besides some who were controlled, there were also some who joined voluntarily, such as Red Tank. It was worth the significant human and material resources we expended. Madame Gao, leaning on her cane, slowly walked past these powerful mutants, a satisfied smile on her withered face. This force was enough to make any organization take notice. All the mutant teams I could gather are here. Stryker turned to Madame Gao, his tone brimming with the confidence of someone in control. Now, proceed according to your plan. I will remotely coordinate their movements through Jason. He himself would naturally not put himself in danger. With the Master of Illusions, he could completely control everything from a safe rear. He was now eagerly anticipating the expressions of those self-proclaimed righteous Saint Seiya when they broke in here, only to find themselves facing a mutant army led by Magneto and a carefully prepared death trap by the Hand. Despair, anger, or disbelief. Success or failure depends on this one move. Madame Gao's expression was solemn, her cane tapping lightly on the ground. During this time, the Hand had not been idle either, almost emptying its coffers. They used their remaining, precious dragon bones to mass-produce more, Black Sky, vessels at all costs. These ninja assassins, completely corrupted by dark energy and stripped of their self-awareness, were even more fearless and stronger than ordinary ninjas, making them more suitable for this life and death war of attrition. To lull the Saint Seiya and prevent them from suspecting, the hand had successively sent several batches of ordinary ninjas to harass and assassinate, but all of them went and never returned. What was even more alarming was that even the hand's unique ritual, which could summon the souls of fallen ninjas back, had lost its effect on those dead ninjas. Their souls seemed to have been completely purified or imprisoned by some power, and their bodies also vanished without a trace, leaving no clues whatsoever. This complete evaporation from body to soul brought the 5 leaders of the hand's apprehension towards the Saint Seiya to its peak. Now, seeing Stryker arrive with such a formidable mutant lineup for support, the heavy pressure in Madame Gao's heart finally eased a little. She looked around. In the shadows, the newly created black skies stood like statues. In the light, were the powerful members of the Brotherhood of Mutants. The entire headquarters had been set up as an inescapable net, with countless traps, barriers, and ambushes hidden in every corner. Tell everyone to take their positions according to the plan. We will make the people of the sanctuary understand that the underground of New York is not where they should be. This will be their burial ground. Madame Gao whispered to an elite ninja beside her, a ruthless glint in her eyes. In the air, the final silence before a great battle hung heavy. The next day, all 7 members of the Saint Seiya Legion were ready. Do you need me to go with you? Doom watched their preparations quietly from the side. No need. This is a mission given to us by His Holiness. You have already helped us a lot during this time. Once this mission is over, we will inform you of the time to return to the sanctuary. Logan shook his head, declining Doom's offer of help. All the extraordinary organizations in the world were watching this battle. They not only had to win, but they had to win completely. I understand. I'll wait for your good news at the school. Doom also understood Logan's meaning and did not insist. Based on his knowledge of Logan and Johnny, plus Clarice and the other Saint Seiya whose depths he didn't know, the chances of winning this battle were very high, with a great advantage. Depart. With a simple command, the 7, like arrows from a bowstring, plunged into the morning bustle of New York, yet with superhuman speed, they rushed towards the dark place beneath the city marked as the Hand's headquarters. According to the precise intelligence provided by Doom, their target was clear, the vast labyrinth buried deep underground, converted from abandoned subway tunnels and air raid shelters. The entrance was hidden behind a seemingly ordinary freight station platform, a heavy iron gate rusted and mottled, yet unable to conceal the chilling and bloody aura emanating from its cracks. This is it. Logan stopped before the iron gate, his nostrils flaring slightly, discerning a faint scent of incense and blood amidst the rust and dust. His 6th sense subtly warned him of the danger behind the door. It makes me uncomfortable all over. Anna frowned slightly, a flicker of disgust passing through her ice-blue eyes, and the surrounding air seemed to cool with it. Who cares what's inside, we'll know once we smash it open. Johnny grinned, flexing his wrists, eager to act. Logan no longer hesitated. With a low roar, the power of the cosmos ignited within him, and a mighty aura erupted from his body. He drew back his right fist and, with a shout, punched out fiercely. Boom! The heavy iron gate twisted and deformed instantly as if struck by heavy artillery, bursting inward with a deafening metallic tearing sound. Amidst the swirling dust, a dim passageway leading deep underground appeared before everyone. Thanks for watching.